Meeting will come to order. We are now holding our regularly scheduled meeting held Tuesday, October 20th, 2009 at 9 a.m. And at this time, I'd like to call on Deputy Teddy Floyd with the Indian River County Sheriff's Office to give the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to be given by Commissioner Gary Wheeler. Welcome, Teddy.
Let us stand. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for our commissioners. We thank you for our law enforcement. But most of all, God, we thank you for our community. We thank you for each and every one who's contributing. And God, when it's all over with, let us come together in peace, do the right thing for the community, God. And we'll be ever so careful to give you the praise. Let us say amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that pause for effect there, Commissioner. On the all right. Thank you. That moves us to proclamations and presentations, and we have a presentation by David Dangerfield on the annual Indian River County Firefighters Chili Cook-Off. You know what? It will help, absolutely.
Karen always makes Chuck look good.
There you go. There you go.
I don't have anything to pass out, though. No chili samples.
We couldn't do it without Point West, so...
absolutely. That's great.
To have them back again this year. So we had a successful year last year. Little rain, so everybody keep their fingers crossed. This year we're doing a double whammy.
Absolutely.
With Friday and Saturday. So we'll let Dave explain.
Thank you, Karen. Absolutely. Without Point West, we wouldn't be able to have such a beautiful area. Last year, yes, with rain, it dampened the spirits. The amount of money made kind of is very unfortunate. This year, we've opened it up. We've done a 2-day. Thinking last year we were cleaning up the second day. It was absolutely gorgeous as we're tearing things down, picking up trash. So we're opening up to a second day. The second day is going to be the International Festive Ale and Fine Cuisine. What that is, we'll have it's a beer sampling, food sampling event. With that, as people arrive, you can go to the website, ircffa.org, if we could post that possibly, ircffa.org.
Okay.
That'll list all the locations where tickets may be purchased. What this is, they'll get to sample over 70 unique beers. We'll have little 2-ounce samples. And in moderation, we'll have food from local restaurants. We encourage the restaurants to come out. They're going to present their food. Hopefully with this as well, it's for the restaurants to be able to bring customers in, handing food out. The Budweiser's taken care of. We encourage everybody to drink responsibly. Budweiser's also taking care of rides home for people as well if needed.
Okay.
Then going on to the Firefighters Chili Cook-Off, November 14th on Saturday. The Festive Ale and Fine Cuisine is November 13th from 5 to 9. Chili Cook-Off will be November 14th from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. once again at Point West. Identical to last year. With this as well, we've got restaurants, businesses, service organizations, public safety divisions, Indian River County School Division. We have numerous divisions out there that will be providing chili. People show up. Because of the economy, we've chosen not to raise the prices again either. We're still keeping it a $5 wristband. Taste as many chilies as they care to taste. Extremely large family event. We have bounce houses. We have pony rides, face painting, numerous other foods as well at the event. So look forward to it. Highly anticipated, exciting.
I think Commissioner Fletcher had his fill of chili last year.
Yeah, as a judge, and he's honored us with that being a judge again.
Excellent. All right.
I'd love to open it up to additional divisions, a county possible division.
That sounds interesting. Maybe we can have
Bob. How does Jackie
different departments within the county government?
I would love that. Last year we opened it up to the school division, and we had Glendale School, Dodgertown School, and St. Edward's School that entered. And as this goes and builds, it allows to have more people to participate. It kind of a friendly little camaraderie between them.
Dave.
And I wouldn't mind if we were, yes, sir.
Do you think it should be county or government units?
Not
I
just-
think to have Fellsmere compete in this would be wonderful. Sebastian ought to be able to put together some chili.
I've never had
Commissioner
broadleaf.
Farr, I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Bureau?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner, yes.
That sounds great. I tell you what, real quick also, David, the proceeds here, where do they go?
The proceeds this year is going to go, Child Care Resources has been phenomenal with us in years past. Child Care is going to be on the top list. Hibiscus Children's Center is another one. We've got the Vero Beach High School Band that is going to Carnegie Hall. They're also a recipient of funds. We've got Troop 506 from the Cub Scouts going to be helping pick up trash. They're going to also be recipient of funds, as well as the Indian River County Sheriff's Explorers Program.
So everything goes to charity, all the proceeds, and
Absolutely.
I just wanted to bring that out that, and this happens, of course, at a time when I understand the community to our south has actually canceled their chili cook-off, and we are adding a new venue to ours, so.
Absolutely.
My hat goes off to y'all, as well as in the partnership that y'all have with Point West, and vice versa, is, I remember when it was on the beach, we outgrew that. And not only that, it was hot. And so, but now that it's this time of year, it's a whole lot more pleasant to eat chili than I believe that was 4th of July weekend, or is that when you
Well,
started?
it was Memorial Weekend.
Memorial Weekend. I knew it
Memorial
was a holiday.
Weekend.
Yeah.
And then the one time we move it to the cooler weather in October and it rains. So that's why we bumped it now to November 14th.
Great.
14th.
That's great.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to suggest that if Mr. Dangerfield will help you write a letter, that you actually send one out on behalf of the county to the different mayors and challenge them to this event.
I will do that. We will have the municipal pot of chili. How's that? Cook-off. Thank you.
That would be
Excellent
fantastic.
suggestion.
Yes.
And in addition, if we're looking at the departmental involvement within the county government, Joe, would it be possible to disseminate an email throughout the departments?
Sure, that's not a problem at all.
I think we can get approvable
And
email invitation.
And we'll put it on our website too for the event. If you'll give us information, we'll put it on the main and a link.
And do a link to the IRFFA.
IRCFFA, Indian River County Firefighters Association.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
we tried to make a website where it's just information for the special events we do like that.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good luck.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes now we're on the Proclamation B, which is presentation of proclamation honoring the Brackett Library. Commissioner Solari?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before reading the proclamation, first I'd like to invite everybody up if they'd like to come to the podium. There's a group of you here representing this great new library. And while they're coming up, I'd like to just let everybody know that on September 17th, 2009, the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce gave out various awards to various buildings, both new and renovated. And the Indian River State College Brackett Library was awarded the best new government building and received a great placard, which I believe can go into the library now. And that, I think, is a wonderful start to a great new library. Now I'm honored to read this proclamation. Whereas our libraries play a vital role in connecting our citizens with the resources they need to live, learn, work, govern, and thrive in the 21st century. And whereas a collaborative initiative between Indian River County and Indian River State College prompted the Florida legislature to match dollar for dollar the county's contribution to the college's foundation, which resulted in the construction of the new Brackett Library at the Mueller Center. And whereas the library is named in honor of Vero Beach community leaders Bob and Sandy Brackett for their generous support of the library through the Indian River State College Foundation. And whereas this full-service library, opening on Wednesday, October 28, 2009, will benefit all members of the county and college communities with its reference, fiction, and nonfiction collections, media services, public meeting room, Marion C. Link Library Lab, and whereas the Disney Vero Beach Resort sponsored the spacious children's and young adult areas to exude the gentle inspiration of Peter Pan alongside the clever daring of the Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners that the Brackett Library is an outstanding example of the results that could be achieved when public, private, local, and state entities combine staff and resources towards a project that so greatly enhances our quality of life. duly adopted this 20th day of October 2009 and signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you, and whoever would like to speak, or if you'd all like to speak, please go ahead. Somebody speaks.
It's a library. And we'd like to thank you, I guess, besides this being a great addition to the Mueller campus, which I think we all would like to see expanded more and more, and it seems to be doing that. It's a great example, I think, of a cooperative effort between government and the private sector as well. And while Indian River County and the state of Florida has enhanced our family financially, being in business here for many years, 45 years, we feel the desire to give back to the county and the people in the area that have blessed us so much. So it's an opportunity for us. We feel honored to be here today and to be a part of the project. Thank you.
Who would like to talk a little bit about the grand opening? Please, come on up. This is going to be a great event, one that a lot of us, especially book lovers, are looking forward to.
We're looking forward to seeing you there, too. I'm Jelaine Ivey, and our executive director, Ann Decker, was not able to be here today, but she wanted me to share with you just what a pleasure this has been working on this project with the county and all that are involved, and to thank the Brackett's for their generosity, along with Disney's Vero Beach Resort and the Lake Marion Link. And what a beautiful facility that you've made it possible to become a reality, and we do look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, October 27th at 1 o'clock. We also have some great refreshments that our culinary arts department has put together, and I won't even go into it because we're going to hopefully have some left for you when you get there. But we do look forward to seeing you. We have a wonderful treasure hunt that will be taking place as you go through the library, so we do encourage you, please come through and check everything out, upstairs, downstairs, and watch out. We might have pirates lingering around, but please come, and we hope to see you each there, and the community at large, too, at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
1 o'clock. Looking forward to it. All right.
Would you like to come on up and get
Yeah, we've got the plaques for you.
How about a round of applause? Those who helped. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now moving on to Proclamation C, which is a presentation of proclamation honoring Friends of the St. Sebastian River. It's 20th anniversary. Commissioner O'Brien will present.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Buzz Herman, could you come down to the podium, please? I think it's appropriate now as we more and more talk, it's centered on our water supply and drinking water and such, that we have this proclamation celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Friends of St. Sebastian River. Whereas the Friends of St. Sebastian River was established 20 years ago to maintain and improve the health and beauty of the St. Sebastian River and its watershed, and whereas the St. Sebastian River is the largest river in Indian River County and one of the largest tributaries of the Indian River Lagoon, an estuary of national significance, and whereas the people of Indian River County benefit greatly from the recreational use of this river, its watershed, and surrounding parks, and whereas the Friends of St. Sebastian River assisted the Sebastian Area Historical Society in having the United States Geodetic Survey correct, properly identify, and officially record the proper historical name of the St. Sebastian River and its prongs. And whereas the Friends of St. Sebastian River has regularly conducted educational programs about the river for the public over the last 20 years, researched and makes available on its website extensive information explaining water quality issues affecting the river and its watershed, and participates actively in community festivals and celebrations with information for the public. And whereas the Friends of St. Sebastian River actively cooperate with other local and regional organizations involved in water resource conservation, including support for the development of the St. Sebastian River Buffer Preserve State Park. And whereas the Friends of St. Sebastian River volunteers have diligently monitored the health of the river in various testing and data collecting efforts for various agencies, and whereas the Friends of St. Sebastian River annually recognizes outstanding volunteer services to our local community and environment by a Sebastian River High School student with the George V. Shum Memorial Award and Scholarship. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, on this 20th day of October in the year 2009, on behalf of the good citizens of Indian River County, congratulations to the Friends of St. Sebastian River on their 20 years of dedicated, faithful service to its mission, and our appreciation for the efforts of its members to maintain the health and beauty of the St. Sebastian River. Adopted this 20th day of October 2009, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Good night. Tim or Buzz, you guys want to say hello?
Yes, good morning. Tim Glover here. I'm President of Friends with Buzz Herman, one of our Board of Director members. And we are celebrating our 20th anniversary with a Oktoberfest-style event this weekend at Dale Wimbrow Park from 3 to 6. We certainly invite all of you and all of the public to come and join us. One of our Board of Directors is German, and he's sharing some of his mother's favorite recipes with us. So it should be a fun event. We're going to have kayaking, kids' activities, and some music, and of course the good German food. So we all invite you to come out.
Super.
Great. Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our presentations and the information items on the agenda. And then now to the consent agenda, Commissioners. I'd like to have item E pulled for discussion. Anyone else? Yes.
I'd like to pull item C.
Item C. Anything else?
No, I'm going to withdraw that. Item E will cover it.
Okay. All right.
Move approval as amended.
Second. Got a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passed unanimously. That moves us to item E. I just wanted to pull this for clarification. Mr. Brawl, sorry about that.
That's okay.
This is a family member of mine, and I would like to know what delineates this being different for me to vote on this versus something that my brother, with his sand mines, that I could not vote on. What is the difference here in the eyes of the law?
She's not near enough in proximity to you. The statute says that it must be a family member, and it lists the family members, but does not include aunts.
So I have to vote?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Commissioners?
I've got a point I need to clarify.
Yes.
Under the recommendation, it says, talking about commencing from October 1st, 2009 and ending September 30, 2010, with an audit occurring at the end of 2010. I'd like clarification on what type of audit that is and who's paying for it.
That was probably a poor use of terms. We were going to have Jason Brown and our finance director under the clerk review her records. We think, an audit, and we're hearing a lot of complaints from our nonprofits that we fund, that an audit costs between $5,000 and $7,000, just a minimum. So what staff's going to review the records, and it'd probably be Jason Brown, and probably we'll have Diane involved.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Good order. Okay. All right. What's your pleasure, Commissioners? I need a motion.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Got a motion to approve staff recommendation from Commissioner O'Brien with a second from Commissioner Wheeler. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes 5 unanimously. Thank you. That moves us from the consent agenda to the public hearings. Mr. DeBraw, would you please read the public hearing items?
Yes. This is a public hearing, a county-initiated request to redesignate 16.22 acres located at 7770 Jungle Trail from L1 low-density residential up to 3 units per acre to C1, Conservation 1, 0 density, and rezone those 16.22 acres from A1 agricultural up to 1 unit per 5 acres to Con 1 Conservation, 0 density, and redesignate 47.25 acres located at 800 Gardenia Street from C2 Conservation 2 District up to 1 unit per 40 acres, and C3 Conservation 3 up to 1 unit for per 2.5 acres to C1 Conservation District with 0 density, and rezone those 47.25 acres from A1 agricultural up to 1 unit per 5 acres, and Con 2 Conservation 2 up, I'm sorry, 1 unit per 40 acres to Con 1, which has a 0 density.
Thank you. Mr. Keating?
Good morning. I'm Bob Keating. I'm County Community Development Director. This is really a pretty simple comp plan amendment and rezoning. It involves 2 properties, both of which are county-owned. One's the Jones Pier property, about 16 acres. The other is the Cypress Bend Community Preserve, about 47 acres. And the proposal is to change both properties to conservation. And I know you've seen this before, but I'd like to give a little background regarding the comprehensive plan amendment process, just so everyone knows what we're doing here. First of all, the county has a comprehensive plan, just like every other local government in the state, and state law actually requires every local government in the state to have a state law, and the state approves local government comprehensive plans. Indian River County's comprehensive plan was approved in 1990, and then it was substantially revised in 1998 after the county did a required evaluation and appraisal report. Along with comprehensive plans, local governments can amend those plans. State law, however, says that local comprehensive plans can be amended only twice a year. Here in Indian River County, we allow comprehensive plan amendment applications to be submitted in the months of January and July. In this case, the amendment we're looking at today was submitted in the January window. And even though that sounds like quite a while ago that it was submitted, that's because the process is kind of a long, involved process. The comprehensive plan amendment process starts with an application being submitted to the Community Development Department. After that, a public hearing is held before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Planning and Zoning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. Next, the board has a public hearing to determine whether or not it wants to transmit the amendment to the State Department of Community Affairs for review. If the board agrees to do that, the application's transmitted to DCA, and the Department of Community Affairs and other state agencies review it, after which the Department of Community Affairs issues what's called an ORC report, objections, recommendations, and comments report. Once staff addresses any issues with the ORC report, we come to this point where the Board of County Commissioners holds its final public hearing, and that's almost the end of the process. The final part of the process is if the board adopts the amendment, it goes back to the Department of Community Affairs for them to do a compliance review. In this case, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the proposed comp plan amendment and rezoning, and they recommended that you approve those, and they recommended that unanimously. The Department of Community Affairs had no objections, recommendations, and comments in its report. Let me just briefly go over the 2 properties. First of all is the Jones's Pier property that is located on the barrier island. It's a long jungle trail, and it's south of County Road 510. Actually, this is really a county enclave. The Jones's Pier property, and then a small subdivision, the Morningside Drive subdivision to the southwest, are in the unincorporated county. The rest of the property around that is in the town of Indian River Shores. As you can see from this graphic, most of the property is an old grove. There's a native vegetation area in the middle of it. There are piers, docks on the west side along the lagoon, and there are several structures there. Mr. Jones currently lives on the property in a life estate. As I said, the county owns this property, and as we do with all the conservation properties that we buy, we are here to request that the board change the comp plan designation to conservation and the zoning to conservation on this. The other property that we have today is the Cypress Bend Community Preserve. This property is west of Roseland Road and it's north of County Road 512. It abuts and is located on the south prong of the St. Sebastian River. It's about 47 acres in size. This property abuts the city of Sebastian on both the east and the south sides. And again, the proposal is to change the comp plan designation and the zoning to conservation. You can see from the aerial here, most of this property is an old grove, but the very western part of the property includes some resource area around the south prong of the St. Sebastian River. In this case, we looked at the criteria we look at with all the comp plan amendments and rezonings. Because the property will have zero density once it's changed, it's exempt from the concurrency requirement. We evaluated the proposed changes with respect to the comp plan, and this is consistent with all comp plan policies. It will be compatible with the surrounding area because it will have zero density and limited to conservation and conservation related uses. So both the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff recommend that the Board of County Commissioners approve the proposed comp plan amendment and rezone.
Any questions, Commissioners? Seeing none, we will close this and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak? Mr. Johnson, welcome.
Bob Johnson, Corwin Subdivision. I get confused on the, it seems like when we have a property that's commercial and we rezone it conservation, then after a while we tend to willy-nilly change the designation of conservation to something else and so forth. And I'm not sure if when we do our designated property conservation, which is approved by the citizens under a bond issue, if there's any provisions in the changing of the criteria for the bond. Maybe if something changes, in other words, I thought the bond issue and the zoning and all this were related, and I'd just like to hear a little clarification on that. Thank you.
With respect to the bond issue, actually both of these properties were purchased with the county's environmentally sensitive bond referendum that was passed. And generally it is the county's policy to change the comprehensive plan designation and the zoning for any property that is purchased for conservation purposes. It's not a mandate, but it's something that the county has committed to and the county does. I don't think there's ever been a case where the county has changed a conservation designation back to a non-conservation designation. So I really don't think that's an issue. One other thing I would encourage Mr. Johnson, I guess he's already talking to Sasan, if he signs that form, we'll make sure the state will keep him informed of anything that happens with this comprehensive plan amendment going forward.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll conclude the public hearing and go into a motion to approve staff recommendation from Commissioner Wheeler with a second from Commissioner Fletcher. And if there's no further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That moves us to the public discussion item that has been pulled at the request of the individual. And then we have public notice items on item C1. Mr. Brawl, will you read that also for me, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Notice of scheduled public hearing for November 3rd, 2009, 510 LLC's request to abandon a segment of 86th Street between 47th Avenue and County Road 510 in Wabasso. This request is similar to a request considered by the board at its August 18, 2009 meeting.
Okay, thank you. At this time, this moves us to the departmental matters, down to community development. Mr. Keating. Again.
Yes. This item relates to the neighborhood stabilization program, and we've been before you a number of times relating to various aspects of this program, but just as a reminder, the neighborhood stabilization program is a federal program, and it's designed to stabilize neighborhoods by providing funding to local governments for local governments to purchase foreclosed properties and then either rent or sell those properties to qualifying households. In our case, the federal NSP, Neighborhood Stabilization Program funds, are being passed through the state, and the state is actually managing the program. And really, for that reason, it's been kind of a long process. The state has had to figure out how the program works, deal with the federal level, write rules, and so it's been kind of a long process going forward. With this program, the county's getting a little over $4.6 million. And to get these funds, the county had to prepare an NSP application that was submitted to the state. And we did that, and the board approved that back in March. And back then, along with the application, we had a general program outline of how the program would work here in Indian River County, and that involved partnering with nonprofit organizations to actually implement the program. Now, because this is a federal program, we have to comply with all the various federal requirements regarding procurement and other aspects of federal regulations. And because of that, we had to go through the RFP, request for proposal process, to select the nonprofits to partner with the county in implementing the NSP program. And through that process, we had 2 nonprofit organizations submit proposals to work with the county in the NSP program. And those were the Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council and the Indian River County Housing Authority. And back in June, the board approved the selection committee's recommendation that both organizations be selected and that both split the money that's available for the program. And since then, we've been working with them and working on other aspects of the program. And we've now drafted agreements with each of the organizations, and today we're here to request your approval for these agreements. We didn't put the agreements in the backup on the agenda. They have been available on file at the board office. Because these are federal, because there's federal money involved, the agreements are long and involved. They have a lot of boilerplate with respect to equal opportunity and a lot of other aspects. And that's one of the reasons we're just trying to save trees, so we kept them on file in the board office instead of having them as part of the process. At this point, both of the groups have had their lawyers review the agreements, and their lawyers have signed off. Both of the groups have approved the agreements. Our legal staff has approved the agreements. So we're at this point ready to go forward. Let me just give you a few highlights of the agreements themselves. Actually, both organizations will receive a little over $2.1 million. In the agreements, Appendix A is the scope of services. It identifies all the activities that the county and the county's NSP consultant will take in the process. It also identifies all the responsibilities of each of the nonprofit organizations. Each of the organizations will be acquiring 10 houses. the Homeless Services Council will actually be renting the houses to qualified households. And 5 of those houses will have to be rented to households that are in the very low income category, and the other 5 can be rented to any household that is moderate income or lower. In terms of the Housing Authority, they will be acquiring 10 houses, and those houses will be sold to qualifying households, and those qualifying households are any household in the low moderate income category, which means the household would have an income of less than 120% of the median. The process that we'll be undertaking going forward is, first of all, if you approve the agreements today, once we get them fully executed, we then need to have them approved by the Department of Community Affairs, who is actually managing this program at the state level. They do what is called desktop monitoring. Once the agreements are approved, then we can go forward. And what we'll be doing is county staff and our consultant will be working with the nonprofits. We will identify properties that have been foreclosed and are currently real estate owned properties. We will be working on those that are identified that the nonprofits want to purchase, and we will actually be putting offers in, doing all of the pre-acquisition due diligence. We'll be going to the closing with the county having the money, but the nonprofit taking title to the property at that time. After the nonprofit takes title to the property and before a final end user is in, whether that's a renter or a buyer, the property will be maintained by the nonprofit, but the county will pay all the costs from Neighborhood Stabilization Program funds. The Homeless Services Council will have to rent the units to qualifying households for a minimum of 15 years. And then the Housing Authority, when they sell the units to qualifying individuals, the county will maintain a mortgage on the property, and that mortgage will represent the amount of NSP funds that are left in the property as down payment costs for the qualifying household. So it's got certain aspects of our SHIP program in it, but it is going to be a partnership between both the county and each of the individual nonprofit organizations. And I do want to emphasize that the objective here is to really stabilize neighborhoods, to keep neighborhoods from deteriorating further when there are abandoned foreclosed properties that are not being maintained. And a secondary objective with the program is really to provide affordable housing for qualified households. That's really a snapshot of the agreements that are before you. There are representatives from both the Housing Authority and the Homeless Services Council here, and they may want to speak on this issue. But at this time, staff recommends that the board approve the agreements with the 2 nonprofits.
Bob, I've got just a quick question. If they're going to buy 10 houses, and I understand there's some maintenance costs of what you're talking about, and they have to be bank-owned properties, how much are we allocating of that $2 million or 2 plus, about $2.1, $2.2 million per entity? How much of that are we allocating to the repairs and renovations of the bank-owned properties? And the reason why I say that is because if we're buying 10 houses, that's $200,000 a piece for houses. That in today's market will buy a lot of house.
Yes, and actually, the budget is in Appendix D of each of the agreements, and we've got 1.8 or 1.9, depending on which the nonprofit, for both purchase and rehabilitation. We initially were hoping to purchase the houses for under $150,000, and hoping to do the rehab for under 30 on each one. With
Bob, that's a lot of money for a house.
Yeah.
I mean, yes.
I'd like to add a couple things here. I mean, I don't think from following this process, which has been a long and actually a very arduous process, I don't think it's anybody's intent to spend $150,000 or $180,000 on a house. Okay. But they had to put a minimum number in there to make the grant. And my understanding is it was a lot easier to go up from 10 to 15 than it was to go from 15 back down. Okay. And given the people involved, I'm sure they're going to be trying to get these houses as fast as possible because, again, my understanding is that after the initial part is done, they can apply to use unused funds and keep them going. So there may be 2 or 3 iterations of this.
Okay.
So that said, I'd also like to take the opportunity to both thank and congratulate all the parties involved. Again, when Bob said he gave a snapshot, he wasn't overstating anything. The contract alone is some of government's best. And just reading through it was an arduous task. Yeah. And there was many people involved in bringing us to this point today and going through things for no real personal benefit. All the people here had to be really dedicated to try to both stabilize neighborhoods and provide affordable housing. From the attorneys on both sides who spent hours and hours reading these documents to the negotiation between staff and these nonprofits who probably talked about 50 to 100 different little nitpicky things which seem innocuous on first blush but can destroy or make a project. And there were multiple meetings on both sides. Both sides had to exhibit a tremendous amount of patience, and at the end of the day, neither side's the direct beneficiary of these contracts. It's people they don't even know yet. So I mean, this is one of those things which the public doesn't see, but again, it brought together people from our community who are working tirelessly to help do something which will help the community as a whole. So I applaud everybody involved in this process, and we'll be very happy when the time comes to make a motion in support of it.
Thank you. Bob, I followed the process of how the Housing Authority is going to be able to handle the mortgage or the process through similar, like you said, with our SHIP program. The homeless shelters, the guarantee that the county or the taxpayer's interest is protected in there somehow. Will there be a mortgage on that of some kind through this process, or a recorded lien of some kind, even though the properties will in fact have been paid for?
Actually, that's a good question. That was our original intent, to have the property secured by a mortgage, but the Homeless Services Council had a concern about having that liability on their books. From a financial and accounting standpoint, it was problematic. Consequently, we are not going to have a mortgage on that property. Instead, we're going to have a deed restriction on that one. We're also going to have a deed restriction on the Housing Authority properties that are sold, but that deed restriction's really in place just in case that house is subsequently foreclosed on. And the deed restriction would limit any further sales of the home, if it's foreclosed on, to a qualifying household. If the buyer of the house from the Housing Authority wants to sell the house and pay back the mortgage, like our SHIP recipients often do, they will be able to do that, and the deed restriction will be extinguished at that time.
Okay.
But the deed restriction for the for sale property that the Housing Authority has is on there solely to protect us and the state in case there's a foreclosure. Where a mortgage would get wiped out, the deed restriction will survive.
Okay. Then the one thing that, and maybe I'm just looking at perhaps the plan a little bit differently of the homeless family shelter, or homeless, how in the event would we be able to extinguish that deed restriction? Can the county do that? Can we make that decision? And all I'm saying is we have an opportunity for an out in an extreme situation with one organization. Is there the opportunity to, from the county's behalf, if it came before us, could we say, okay, this deed restriction, we would like to make it go away for some unknown reasons, because there's nothing more permanent than a deed restriction, and they get very difficult to undo if they're not worded properly.
In this situation, Bob, title would be held by the county, correct?
No.
Who would hold the title?
The homeless.
The title will be held by the Homeless Services Council. The deed restriction, though, will be enforced only as long as the house is required to comply with the program, which is 15 years.
And it would expire then at the end of the 15 years, or if the Homeless Council would choose to remove it?
Yes.
As the title holder?
No, they won't be able to remove it themselves until the 15 years.
Until the 15 years, correct.
And then after the 15 years is up, though, I mean, basically, this asset and the deed restrictions would be then given, that they would go away, and I guess really, I'm kind of looking out for the next step of the taxpayers' dollars 15 years from now, and I follow it with our, somebody say something?
Yeah, I said it's too late to look out for the taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah, really, it's already too far in the federal process, huh?
Mr. Chairman, is your question how we extinguish the deed restriction prior to the 15 years?
I would like to know how we would do that as the county, but more importantly, after the 15 years, when the process is up, what happens to that asset that the taxpayers have paid for, and who has the ability to sell or not sell, and to whom?
Well, the deed restriction will limit the ability to sell for 15 years. Since the deed restriction would run in favor of the county would have the right to extinguish prior to the 15-year period. It would automatically happen if they paid back all the outstanding NSP funds that were put into the house. After 15 years, the deed restriction would disappear, and since there would be no other restriction on the house, there would be no limitation on who could purchase the house after the 15 years.
Okay, so there is a process for the homeless entity of this to actually pay it back, very similar to the housing authority, in River County Housing Authority.
Yes, as long as the NSP funds have been paid back in full.
Okay, I was envisioning this as perhaps a never-ending rent of some kind for a specific. Okay, all right, I'm clear now. Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, we're looking at, and I'm just going to vent for a minute. But we're looking at $4,680,825. How much of that money would you estimate is being paid out in administrative fees for the push of government workers, the government paperwork, the staff to work on all this stuff, and how much do you think is brought back into the community to do this? You know, it's almost like we're creating jobs through government more and more and more. As I get older and older and older, I see more of it, and we don't produce anything. Paperwork.
Actually, about 10% is going to be going for administration overall. Probably a little more when you consider that part of the money that's being given to the nonprofits will be used for their administration. But almost all, about 90%, is actually going to go into buying the houses and rehabilitating the houses, or paying the maintenance costs of houses until a final.
So in the neighborhood of $500,000 going into administrative fees to buy in the neighborhood of 20 houses. That doesn't count real estate fees, bank foreclosures, points, etc.
That's correct. The various costs we incur, particularly the pre-acquisition due diligence costs, such as appraisals, surveys.
I just see this as such an inefficient way to accomplish goals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Wheeler. Commissioner Solari?
I'd like to make a couple comments, especially on the rental side. I'm going to agree with Commissioner Wheeler that there's a lot of inefficiencies, but the inefficiencies are basically driven by the federal laws and statutes which cover this. But once it gets down to this level, one of the things that's happening is that some of these houses are going for, I believe, very, very low housing and very low housing. And when you look at it and look at the pro formas involved in the rental housing and the 15-year period, the nonprofits are charged and required to maintain those houses. So while they may get 10% of the fees coming to them, they over time are actually going to have to probably do fundraisers and other things to make sure that they have the money to keep the houses up. There is no way that the fees that they collect are going to be enough to not only manage the properties and fulfill their paper requirements to the county, the state, and the federal government, and also maintain the houses. And that's one of the benefits to us, is that we're going to have a group of nonprofits who are fundraising, doing work volunteer time, that will actually be adding a substantial amount of value to this process. So again, we can't fault any of them or any local people for the added burdens that the state and federal government are doing.
You know, every time you get free money coming down from the federal government, it does good in the community. But what does it cost us to send that free money and tax dollars to Washington, D.C. so the bureaucrats can continue to push it around? And that's my point. I'm just really fed up with it. You know, and this is, and I agree. I think locally, yeah, a lot of money comes down from grants, but it's our money to begin with. And, but they attach strings, so you have to create even a bigger bureaucracy to administer their programs. And we create jobs through doing that for government that really doesn't produce anything, so there's no profit.
I think, and I would like to compliment staff on this.
I agree. I'm not knocking staff or any of the local people.
But we didn't create a department for this.
No.
Well, I mean, this is clearly, we said, hey, who has the burning desire to do this the most? And they came forward through the RFP process, and we now don't have an NSP department with a department head and a telephone number and all those things that go along with a bureaucracy.
And I would wager to think that would cost us in the neighborhood of 30% of what we're trying to accomplish. This is a great example of a private partnership that we have here on the local level, and in the community we have the nonprofits that are going to step up to the plate and maintain the maintenance agreements and the funding as well. I think this process is probably going to pale if we had to do it on our own and at our local taxpayer dollars.
Okay, Commissioners, any other comments, questions? All right.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve staff recommendations with the 4 points in the agenda.
Second.
Got a motion to approve staff's recommendation with the 4 points in the agenda made by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Flesher, and is now open for discussion. Commissioners, you got any questions? If not, I'm going to open it up for some public comment. Mr. Johnson, welcome.
Do we, Bob Johnson, Corwin, do we know where these 10 houses are located? These have been identified, these 10, could somebody identify where these 10 houses are located that we're intending to buy?
Mr. Keating?
Yes, we have not identified that yet because we have a few more hoops to go through before we can actually go and start identifying houses and buying them.
We could safely say Indian River County, though.
Oh, yes, it'll be in Indian River County.
Yeah.
But I do want to tell you that the list of foreclosed real estate-owned properties changes constantly. We actually generated a report yesterday, and I think we had about 110 on the list. Whereas you read a lot of numbers about the number of foreclosures that are happening, those numbers usually reflect foreclosures that are any point in the process, including the filing the first lis pendens to all the way through the foreclosure process. In this case, we do have a limited supply. These are houses probably under, I think we've filtered this by under $250,000, the advertised sale price. And as I said, we only have, I think, about 110 on the list right now. But it's constantly changing, so we won't even know the universe of foreclosed properties to look at until we get to the point of actually being able to purchase the houses.
Thank you. Ms. Hubbard, welcome.
Louise Hubbard, Executive Director, Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council. Everything that's been said here is true. This has been the most grueling, strenuous process that I've seen, even with the county, in now almost 11 years. However, the level of participation and cooperation has been extraordinary. And I personally want to make this comment that the people in the planning department and the commissioners have gone out of their way to be open, responsive, receptive. Bob Keating and his staff were excellent and made every possible attempt to work between and among the insanity that is the federal and state process. In addition to that, if we didn't have Tom Tierney from Rossway, Moore and Taylor, Bob Solari and Joe Flesher, I probably would have shot myself at this stage in the game.
I'm glad you didn't.
For those of you who have any concern about our profit-making potential, The fact of the matter is, the only reason that a nonprofit is capable, as Bob said, of actually committing to this process is because it does have the potential, and I'd certainly like to put that word potential in quotes in this economy, to secure additional funding to maintain the property appropriately so that the neighborhood ultimately is stabilized. If you look at the pro formas, you'll see that those people who are at or below 50% of AMI can only pay less than $300 a month in rental. Even I'm not magic enough to make money at $324 a month per unit. So we clearly understood going in, as does the Housing Authority, I suspect, that this is not about financial profit. It's barely about financial viability, other than with the resources that we have available to us and that I think we're able to secure going forward to maintain these properties so that communities don't deteriorate. All of the intent of this initially has obviously been lost on all the craziness involved in the state and the Fed and the county and the city but essentially the bottom line is that we would identify properties that are appropriate for the clients as well. They won't be, put in bulks. There won't be 6 places in one street. There will in fact be just a way in which a property which has been vacant for some time, in many cases new, in many cases never occupied, can be stabilized so that the grass doesn't grow and there's not a tree on the roof. And subsequently, we would have the capacity then to have some control over landlords in this community who run roughshod over lots of the people who do only make $19,000 a year for a family of 4. But I just wanted you to know that the cooperation from planning has been unprecedented, and I genuinely appreciate the effort that they've made, because it's been more than a year and their hands were tied and so were ours, but we decided to do it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hubbard. Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor to approve staff's recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. That moves us to Public Works with the right-of-way acquisition of County Road 510 Project 610, 85th Street, Parcel D. Mr. Moore, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Morrow, Public Works Director for the county. This is a right-of-way acquisition on County Road 510 for the County Road 510 4-laning project between County Road 512 and US 1, or actually just east of US 1. It is the Mays property, which is located on the south side. It's actually an L-shaped property located on the south side of County Road 510, about 500 feet east of 75th Court. Patricia Mays is the owner of this property. It's currently vacant. There are no structures on it, and it's zoned agricultural. It consists of a 4.77 acre site, and this is going to be a full take. The reason that it's a full take is that we need to put a pond site, a retention pond, a stormwater retention pond on this property, and it will actually drain or serve as an outfall for the 4-lane section of County Road 510 between Lateral L Canal, which is about a half a mile to the west, all the way east to 66th Avenue. So it's going to act as a drain for that about a mile and a half of 4-lane facility. Ultimately, it will become part of a larger stormwater lake that will be part of the Liberty Park development. Liberty Park owns the site property to the south and all of this property to the east all the way to 66th Avenue. Once that Liberty Park development develops out, this will become a lake amenity for that property. But currently, we intend to use it as a stormwater retention area for the 510 4-laning. By purchasing the entire site, we also get the right-of-way that we need to accomplish the 4-laning, which is an 18 by 60 foot piece up on the south side of 510. We also get the temporary construction easement, another 600 square feet, and we get this long 20 by 400 foot drainage easement that we would have had to secure in order to make the pond work. The way the drainage will work is the water will flow off of 510 through an enclosed drainage system down through a pipe in this narrow area and into the pond, and then ultimately it will outfall to the south to the lateral 13E canal, which runs east-west along the south side of the property. This is a voluntary sale and purchase. We've been in negotiations with Mrs. Mays. We're using the standard $55,600 per acre valuation for property that's similar to comparable properties in the area. If you do the math, 4.77 acres at $55,600 an acre comes to $265,212. Mrs. Mays has asked that she have an attorney to look at the contract, although she has signed it, so she may or may not exercise her right to that attorney, a fee that would be paid by the county. There are no other fees associated, no appraisal fees, no planner, engineer, expert fees, nothing else. This is pretty much a voluntary sale and purchase. Alternatives are for the board to, number one, approve the agreement as presented. Total acquisition package of $267,212. That includes the possible $2,000 attorney fee. Alternative number two would be to reject it and have staff go back and negotiate some more with Mrs. Mays. Staff's recommendation is to approve the agreement as presented with a total acquisition package of $267,212.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? I have one just real quick. With the subdivision on the north side of the road, and that being the city of Sebastian, did we or did we not get enough right-of-way so we do not have to buy any right-of-way on the south side of 510 through here?
There are still some areas that we have to purchase, mostly to the east. In this area, we have pretty much what we need along the south side, yes.
Okay. Because I just know that the gentleman that is immediately north of this parcel but still south of 512 or 510, there's been some dialogue going back to a long time with his, and I don't know whether we've done anything with it or not, or if we're even going to need anything.
Right, we're still in active negotiations with many parties along 510, particularly to the east, not so much in this area, but to the east.
To the east of this area?
East of this area, that's correct.
All right, Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, what's your pleasure?
Move staff's recommendation.
Got a motion to approve staff recommendation from Commissioner Wheeler. Is there a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that moves us to the Public Works Fleet Management Privatization of Vehicle and Equipment Parts, Management and Supply. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a project to look into privatizing the parts inventory, management, and supply operation that currently takes part in the county's fleet management facility. Currently, for some background on this, the county currently owns and operates its own fleet maintenance and repair facility. This is located on the south side of 41st Street. Between 58th Avenue and 43rd Avenue. Fleet is one of 8 operating divisions within the Public Works Department. Consists of 9 personnel. We have a fleet manager, Mr. Mike Owens, who's here today. Mike. There's also a parts clerk, an office clerk, or records clerk, and then we have 6 mechanics on our staff. Fleet's tasked with the maintenance and repair of approximately 750 vehicles and as well as pieces of equipment within 39 different county departments and divisions, as well as 9 outside agencies. Some of the larger outside agencies that we manage vehicles for, the Senior Resource Association, we service and fuel their buses for the county transit system. Also, we do handle fueling for the Sheriff's Office and the school board, among other outside agencies. Overall, we dispense about 100,000 gallons of unleaded gasoline and diesel fuel per month. Overall, the county owns and manages its own inventory of repair parts. Currently, we spend about $500,000 annually to purchase new parts for inventory and to use on vehicles. How we purchase those parts is we do it in different ways. We have numerous suppliers that we use. Some are local, some are out of town. Some suppliers that we have a continuing purchase arrangement with, we use these annual or fixed price, or what we call blanket agreements that we utilize. And then we also act very much like a consumer. We go out and we search for the lowest price part in order to get that part and have our mechanics use it to put on vehicles. As time has gone by and our number of vehicles and pieces of equipment has gotten larger and larger, we've kind of shifted more towards keeping the mechanics working and keeping everybody going, and we've kind of gotten away from having a real reliable inventory management system. This is why back in May we decided to go out with an RFP, a request for proposals, for a fleet vehicle and equipment parts management system. This was a project to look into privatizing our county parts management and supply to see if maybe the private sector could do it cheaper, better, and easier. Prior to at the pre-bid meeting and prior to sending out the advertisement for bids, we had a lot of interest in it. However, once we advertised, there was only one company that responded, and that was Napa. They responded through their local affiliate, Indian River Auto Parts, LLC. Indian River Auto Parts operates 2 stores in the greater Vero Beach area. One over here on 12th Avenue, just east of US 1, and then one out State Road 60, almost to 90th Avenue. As part of their proposal, Napa proposed to stock and manage an in-house parts operation right within our fleet facility on 41st Street. Napa proposed to have their own personnel, parts and inventory management within that small facility. In exchange, the county would agree to pay Napa's operating expenses for that in-house parts facility, and we would purchase all of our parts that we needed from Napa at their cost plus 10%. Certain items like tires and fuel we did not put into this agreement. Tires we find we can purchase much cheaper off of a state contract, and we're going to continue to do that regardless of the board's action today. And also fuel we can get much cheaper on our own. So they're not part of this agreement. Emergency Services District, which also operates vehicle maintenance repair out of our facility, they opted out of the agreement also, with the exception of oil filters. They did say they'd purchase oil filters through this agreement. As I mentioned earlier, when we got into the analysis of Napa's bid, we currently spend about $500,000 annually in purchasing parts. To evaluate Napa's proposal, we put together a table, and this is in attachment 1 of your backup, of 24 commonly purchased medium-duty parts, that'd be for cars and light trucks, and also 15 heavy-duty parts, these would be for trucks. And then we compared them with the various vendors and suppliers we currently use versus Napa's cost plus 10% proposal. And that's, as I mentioned, that's shown in attachment 1 of your backup. Attachment 2 in your backup is a comparison that the budget office, county budget office put together for us, comparing staffing costs, both the county's current system versus what we would have to pay Napa if they staffed an in-house parts operation. The results of our analysis showed in attachment 1, which is the parts cost comparison, the county's current system, whereby we shop and use multiple vendors to get our parts from, would end up saving us between 9 and 25% over the Napa proposal. Now, the reason there's a range there is because we really don't know just how Napa would supply those parts. Would they supply us just Napa parts? Would they also shop around like we do and then add 10% to that price? It wasn't really clear from their proposal just how they would do that. If they just provided Napa parts, which already has a built-in markup to them, and then add 10% out of that, most likely it'd be closer to the 25% figure. But either way, it looks like that they would end up costing us more in just the parts acquisition. Attachment 2 was the staff cost comparison, whereby the county looked at its current system, which is a parts clerk who works for Fleet, his salary plus benefits and office expenses. How would that look versus Napa's staffing proposal? And it was shown to cost slightly less than Napa's proposal, but they were very close. The results of our analysis were that we calculate that if the Napa proposal were implemented, the county parts acquisition costs would increase from about $500,000 a year to anywhere from $545,000 to $625,000 per year, and that's that 9 to 25% spread that I showed you. Staff savings, as I mentioned, were very close, probably would be negligible. Alternatives for the board to consider are, number 1, to keep the current county-run parts management and supply operation. Number 2 would be to go ahead and privatize it, award the project to Napa, direct staff to go ahead and get a contract with Napa, bring that back for execution by the board, and then to subsequently dismantle the current county-run operation just for parts. Staff's recommendation is alternative number 1, to keep the current county-run parts management and supply operation. We feel that it's cheaper, it's served us very well, and we really don't see a need to change. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Commissioner Fletcher.
Thank you. Some months ago, we had the opportunity to meet the applicant and most certainly go over some of the key items and the benefits of going into a privatized mode. And I clearly then explained that privatization is an uphill battle to sell to me. And I want to thank them for taking the time to explain every aspect of the privatization mode and how it would affect the employees and the operation for key personnel like Mike and Lee. And I did take the time to go over to the site on several times and request some of the information independently. And with that in mind, I realize that the numbers do not compare that well to a savings for the taxpayers, but I was more concerned about the internal mechanism for our local economy. And I did share that with the applicants as well as many that I've discussed it with. We currently have many vendors involved, and their livelihoods are based upon the purchasing decisions and expectations of what we do in fleet services. I'd like to take the time to commend the management at Fleet Services, because when I pulled out some of the purchasing tickets, they've done their very best to ensure that we've had the best in parts delivery, but more importantly, as far as a value to the taxpayers. As you suggested, a lot of the vehicles that we're responsible for are being serviced at Fleet Management, and I see no reason why not to continue with the same existing pattern that we have in place. And I want to thank the individuals for doing that. So with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion to accept alternative number 1 and maintain the current operation that we have in place.
Second.
Got a motion to accept staff recommendation number 1, and the second made by Commissioner Fletcher with a second by Commissioner Solari, and is now open for discussion. Any further discussion or comments? Anybody from the public wish to speak, please come forward.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is John Crane with Genuine Parts Company, Napa Auto Parts. I help put together the response to the RFP for Mr. Tallenberg. The concern that I have is the numbers that Public Works staff is using are not accurate. And to answer a couple of those questions, we at the Integrated Business Solutions, what this program is to us, was what we call it, we do source from many vendors other than Napa. We can't supply everything when you work on fire trucks to police cars to that. So at least 50% of that inventory comes from outside vendors and other purchase agreements that we have, local vendors. In response to some of these numbers that they use, they're just not accurate. We were not brought in to discuss the RFP or have any questions answered. The staffing, for instance, they put freight and postage in there as a part of that, like they would not have any freight and postage. Obviously, they have things shipped in UPS. We created a spreadsheet as an estimate to what expenses are, but this has been on the table since June 10th, and after many communications trying to discuss it, we've never once had an opportunity to answer any questions or explain how the program actually works, and I think that would have cleared up a lot of it. Even the pricing, when they called to get the pricing, they didn't even contact us through the RFP. They called directly from the parts room and called one of our counter people at our stores that understands nothing about this program. This is a national program that we operate in over 250 municipalities, city governments, counties throughout the nation. And there's no way that a counter person would have any understanding or how to price that. So we feel that those numbers are incorrect too. And we just wanted the opportunity to explain the program. If it's not right for the county, we understand, but to at least be fair and let us, we put the work into the RFP, and we're the only ones that did respond because, we do this. This is what we do. And you would basically own a Napa store for the county. You'd be buying at Napa cost, not at what we're pricing you over the counter. So I think there's some confusion there and needs some more explanation. So I would ask that you maybe recommend to extend that or at least go into discussion to get the answers that are needed in this.
And the Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chairman? And I could appreciate your statement about the numbers may have been collected from staff, by staff from counter persons, but I then also took the opportunity, I burdened Mike a bit and pulled some tickets on various items, whether they be CarQuest, Cold Air, Veldy, Napa, and I had him just pull a couple of the purchasing tickets, and the price most certainly was reflective of existing purchases. We did not look at something in the future, but most certainly that I saw that the staff had taken the time to ensure that they had the best possible price. It wasn't based upon availability or immediacy.
Right. Well, this program offers to sell you at Napa cost, and then we charge a management fee at the end. So any supplier, whether it's Napa, CarQuest, any of these other competitors, there is a gross profit markup for them to deliver services. It's 30, 40%. So you're not looking at numbers to numbers. Yeah.
Well, you gave us prices, so that's what confuses me. I mean, you gave us prices for certain items, so that's what confuses me. If those prices, we check, we buy them cheaper, what's the difference?
Well, there could be a couple different scenarios. First of all, like one of the questions was on an alternator. We quoted you a brand new alternator, and obviously there's rebuilts on here, which are extremely different in price. It's not apples for apples. The other issue on there is our store people do not have access to that true cost. He's not going to give the counterman level that excess. I mean, the proper way should have been to contact the respondents of the RFP to bring us in for pricing, and we could have given you the true pricing. And, you know, we do this everywhere. I mean, we're in many counties and cities. Our books are open. So whether we buy from CarQuest or from Cold Air, we still sell at cost. So, and we have pricing agreements in place with large vendors to get you better pricing. On tires also, we buy off state contract, sheriff's contract. We also have contracts with Michelin and can buy at less than state and sheriff's contract. So I just don't think the due diligence was put into place to really review the pricing aspect. And that's not even really where the cost savings comes in. We take you out of the inventory business. We own that inventory. So now that's what, $100,000 of our inventory. We probably double it, put in $200,000 with inventory. Now the technicians aren't standing around waiting for parts. The whole success of this program is to get the technicians not waiting for parts and improve efficiency. Because you've got technicians waiting for parts to be delivered when they're not in that parts room.
And on that point, I did take the time to review the stock room as well, and it probably is the smallest stock room for the size fleet that I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, Lee doesn't like to keep an inventory of more than one item at any one time, and because of the great cooperation with the local vendors, he's been able to get those parts very quickly. But as far as our parts room, there's not a huge amount of tires or inventory. And you pointed out on the alternators, I compared a brand new alternator with a brand new alternator and a rebuilt with a rebuilt, and I wanted to ensure that we had those fair prices. I personally want to look at it independently in case there was some discussion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? The alternator, are you talking about the top item on the list?
Yes.
Do you know that those are remanufactured alternators from the other vendors?
By one of the part numbers, yes. But when you're comparing, you know, you're not comparing a big pen to a big pen. You have to, we sell 3 lines of brake pads.
Were one or both of the others remanufactured? Or one or both of the other vendors?
I don't know if both of them are. I just know we weren't even notified of this until yesterday afternoon. So we didn't have much time to research all of it. But I can tell you that just looking through it, buying at his store cost, at his sale, the same level that the 2 stores in town buy at, there would be a much greater difference than what's currently shown on these spreadsheets. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in business and able to deliver to you every day.
You know, you did say you use state and federal contract for tires. Well, we do too. And then we pay you 10%. We don't have to pay that 10%. That's
Correct.
Another big savings. And I did have some discussion with, that the numbers did appear about a month ago with the local NAPA representative that initially I thought we were going to go, but when we started comparing numbers, they didn't work. And, we looked at these things. We asked you to give your best bid. And the other thing is the movement in America is not to increase inventory because delivery is so good. Today, I think if you look at corporate America, the key is keeping inventories down and being able to get the parts immediately rather than store. Because it's money on the shelf.
That is true, and that's on our books. But in order to make this program work, in order to have the part 8 out of 10 times, which is what we go for, you have a $26 an hour technician standing there waiting to do a brake job, it gets costly. So we do it by managing the inventory, reducing those costs, obsolescence, shrinkage, all that goes away. You're not paying, we manage all the invoices, so procurement's not going through thousands of invoices a month. They're paying one bill at the end of the month. There's a lot of cost savings that were in the RFP that weren't discussed in this recommendation.
In the RFP, your response to the RFP says shipping performance, can the vendor meet schedules? And your answer was turnaround time 48 hours, order fill 95%. There is no allusion to any immediate turnaround on 80% of the parts there, I believe. That's not in the RFP. What's in the RFP indicates a turnaround time of 48 hours, which is not superior to what we have now at 95%.
I think in our RFP that our goal is 80% on-demand rate at the counter, and it's in every one of our advertisements. And we actually even took people to visit other locations, Polk County, Hillsborough County, to see those operations in effect, to kind of give them an example of what we do. So it's definitely in there. It's, it's in our response, the costs are estimated because we don't know exactly what person's going to be in that place yet. So we're using averages based on others. That's what's a request for proposal. It's not a bid.
Any other comments or questions, Commissioner?
Yeah, in listening to this, and it happens occasionally, I'd like to see this go back. I'd like to see our staff sit down with their staff and compare apples with apples right from the beginning to the end and come up with specifics. And when they come in here, both of them can say, yep, we looked at these items, and these items. This is their price. This is what we're doing it for. And I'd just like to have some accuracy rather than disagreement about what we've looked at. And I think if they sit down together and then go through and ask these questions, it can be documented and brought here where we don't have this difference in opinion. So and it's a big thing with auto parts, so I'd like to see it go back and see staff sit down with them and negotiate and see where the real prices are. So when they do come in, like I said before, they agree that we disagree or we agree, one or the other.
Penny.
Thank you. Penny Chandler, Indian River County Chamber of Commerce. I agree with what Commissioner Wheeler just stated. I know nothing about this process that you went through, but I do know that if a private vendor is getting up and saying he wishes there would have been some personal communication, that makes me throw a flag on the field somewhere and say, it would have been great to have that participation from the private sector, so that when tax dollars are being spent, that we can guarantee that it was the best possible methods being used, and that the private sector and the business community had every opportunity to get all the questions answered and have it be apples to apples. So I would appreciate that. Thanks, Commissioner Wheeler.
Let me say something, Penny. Presently, we buy from local vendors. They're on
Understand.
state contracts. So we're moving from one local vendor to one, and I don't know if the way he's saying he's local to local, there's a local part, but we buy all our parts locally.
I understand.
That's not going to change. Velde, Ford, Napa, whoever gives us the best price for that day. So don't forget the parts. As much as we can, we buy local.
I understand, and I
And we
appreciate
bid
that.
them.
And what I'm saying is that when I see somebody from the private sector coming up saying, we didn't get the call, we weren't asked the questions to make sure that we were comparing apples to apples, it throws an alert to me that maybe that should take place. And I agree with what Commissioner Wheeler was suggesting, that perhaps if it just went back for a little bit of conversation, that you may be able to iron out areas where if it's not apples to apples, then somebody from staff for sure can come back and say, we asked the right questions, everybody was satisfied with the answers that were provided. And I do appreciate the fact that you're now using private sector, local businesses to do this right now. It just concerns me that a private vendor would have these concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like Joe to have the opportunity, or Chris, to explain the process of selection.
We went
process.
through RFQ, and I think what we can do, we can hold this off a week. If I don't think it hurts to hold it off a week to make a decision, sit down. There have been discussions. We've had discussions on the phone. A gentleman did meet with me regarding, he can use state and contract on federal contract and sheriff's contract just like we can. The difference is he adds 10%. Well, why not I can do that local and still be with local vendors. So I think what we need to do is, I'll be glad to sit down. We'll sit down with them and we'll see in case there has been a difference here, and we can bring it back in a couple of weeks and sit down. But I didn't want anyone here to not think our fleet management buys most of their parts local from local vendors. So, and I just want that clear as much as we can.
We currently have a motion on the floor for staff recommendation, alternative number one, which is to not move forward. Before we do that, though, I would like to say I did go to the Bartow facility and look at the operation in action, and it's interesting because it's a parts store inside our fleet maintenance department. Now, whether or not the parts are cheaper, that was something that I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But it was really interesting to see how you could have some over there. They do their ambulances and everything. You go over there, they need a buckle for a handicap wheelchair inside something like our Senior Resource Association for the seat belt. You go in there, there's 3 of them on the shelf. If they need one, they said, well, we go through quite a few of these, therefore we have those in stock. Now, yeah, did we pay 10% more for it? Yes, probably, because I doubt that's something that Napa would carry. I don't know. But it was just interesting to see the process in there and to talk to the employees that were utilizing that service, and they did seem satisfied with it. Now, not to say that that's what is best for Indian River County, but it was an interesting process to go over and actually see that in action over in Bartow that Polk County is doing.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, all the things that have been said about state contract, they can do it, we can do it, buy local, whatever. I think these are all interesting, but it's not a part of the question here. The question here is the cost, who can do it better and cheaper. And I don't feel comfortable that we can answer that question if staff hasn't had negotiations and conversations with them looking at specifics. And if that's the case, I haven't heard that if that's the case. We've got 2 people here saying 2 different things, and I'd like to see the conversation happen so I know, and they can come in after the conversation that, we looked at X number of items and we went through this and here's our position on it, and we don't agree with them or whatever, but at least I feel more comfortable knowing that there's been dialogue.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Moore, you have something you want to add?
I want to try and clear up some confusion. We did get these costs from Napa, from Mr. Tomberg. They do, if you look at the 2 columns with the Napa price versus the Napa contract plus 10%, they're different prices. In some cases they're lower, in some cases they're higher. So it's not as if we called a parts clerk at Napa and said, what's your price? There are different prices. If we called them today and treated them like any other vendor and got a price, that would be the Napa column price. When we called and got the Napa contract price, in almost every case it's different. And they did give us prices for each of those parts to be applied under this contract. So there should be no confusion there. We did talk and get these prices from Mr. Tomberg, and in almost every case it is different.
Okay, but you said what I just heard you say is that it is different. Were they higher or lower? I mean, if you call over the counter and said this is the price I want compared to what their contract price is, and I don't really, I hate getting in a long dialogue about this. I just would like to see dialogue rather than,
Well, and we have had that dialogue. What we would have to do now, and we can do that if it's the board's desire to go back and try and get a better price from them, we can give them these same parts and see what kind of deal, hopefully a better deal, we can get under the contract if that contract were to be implemented. But I think we would want some explanation from them why they would give us a lower price now versus when we requested the price earlier.
And that's the objective of dialogue, so you can ask these questions back and forth.
Hello, I'm Mark Tomberg. I never gave any prices to anybody on this, for your information. Nobody contacted me specifically and got prices from me.
The other thing I'd just like to point out was, and just to make an observation, obviously if we're selling you at cost under this program, we would never be higher under the proposed program that you just stated than what we normally sell you on a day-to-day basis, because you just made the comment, and there are some in there where it shows us actually being higher in price under this program than what we currently sell you day-to-day, and that's not possible.
Most of the prices were lower on this contract cost that you gave us. The exception tends to be the air filters and oil filters. I guess there's a national program for filters that were on, and for some reason what was explained to our fleet manager was that we wouldn't be eligible for that under this. So those are the only ones that are in any numbers that are more expensive than the current price we're getting today. Virtually all the others are lower cost, and in some cases substantially lower than we're getting.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
As a local auto parts vendor for the county and a competitor of Napa, we chose not to bid on this because we didn't see any way that we could do it less expensively than the county had done in the previous years. If we're going to offer them the opportunity to go back and renegotiate what they're wanting to do, then I mean, why don't we start the whole bid process all over again and lay the whole thing out there? If we're going to start from scratch, make it fair and offer it for everyone. I mean, I have a very large stake in this as well as a lot of the other local vendors, and I don't like to see the opportunity for them to come in and continue to renegotiate until we strike a deal where they can take that business from me.
I promise you that we're not going to renegotiate our contract. It's a set proposal that we offer to every city and county, this proposal. So it's the only thing that's different is staffing or certain requirements that you require. The program is the same. We just want to explain it so that you have a better understanding of it and really see where the cost savings are. And it's not always just on the parts. There's huge cost savings throughout the board on this besides just the parts. And I think that's where you're really missing the boat on.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm not looking to renegotiate or do anything else. I just want to know if there's personal. I just bought an air conditioner. I got 3 different bids. I talked to each one of the people to ask additional questions. I had conversation with them. I had dialogue with them, and that's all I'm at. I just want to know that there's dialogue, and I would think that if you had the dialogue, you could come in here and you could say, you know what. We agree on what we looked at, and these are the prices, and so on and so forth. I'm just looking for an answer to this, and I don't feel comfortable with the answer I've got at this point, based on what I'm hearing right now.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman. By the same token, I see this gentleman's point. Does this bloody the RFQ process? I mean, have we not set forward an offer? Yes, you were the only applicant to step up. But now we're going to look at to see if we can change the data.
No,
I think we've had the
changing the data.
Excuse me, Commissioner Wheeler.
You're excused.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, John. Let's keep this moving forward.
I think we've had plenty of opportunity for discussion, and I've spoke to you in the past, and I believe that you've been in the building on several occasions, and I believe that was to bring information to staff or to discuss it with staff. Would that be the case?
Or as far as I'm aware of. We've never been contacted once to discuss this. We've called requesting information or to discuss it, especially since we were the only bidder.
I've met with that gentleman 3 times, so I'm a little surprised.
I thought you did too, sir.
To discuss the proposal or to discuss what the status was?
Yeah, in fact, we discussed why we wouldn't do, we had a long discussion about tires. If you recall why, we should include tires. I said we've got state and federal contract. Why would I add your 10%? We've had discussion, but I think we can continue to have discussion. I think it'll be healthy if we postpone this vote. But I do want the commissioner to understand we do price locally, and we do buy most of everything we can locally, and that's what our manager does. So when we do award it, there'll be other vendors that are local that will be also upset. So you get that side of it, and I think it's good. We will sit down. I think it's in everyone's best interest, and we'll bring this back in a couple of weeks again. But we priced it. Staff looked at it hard. In fact, we postponed it 3 times. I asked staff to look more in depth. I was more concerned that we weren't just picking a few parts. We make sure we're covering our whole range, and that's what we did.
And I don't doubt that there was a good job done by staff. I'd just like to see dialogue. I'd also like to ask the attorney a question. I understand this is an RFQ, correct?
RFP, sir.
Oh, it is. Okay, I heard RFQ mentioned. Okay.
Any other questions or comments, Commissioner? Okay, we have a motion on the floor then to approve staff recommendation, which is to reject. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
I know what you meant, Commissioner.
I always confused me.
Okay, that motion failed 3-2. Okay, now was there a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion that we have staff go back and spend some time looking at this, asking the questions, and then bringing it back to us sometime in November, whenever it works out. I know everybody's busy.
Commissioner, if I could, before we move forward with that, to address the concern as far as opening this up and giving one side to, I guess, to reopen the bid process. I think you've got a legitimate concern.
I don't.
And I would like to see to it that does not happen. But the communication from staff, really just that one page is or the 2 pages is what I'd like to look at, their price versus what they can offer.
I agree with that, Wesley.
Okay.
I'm not for renegotiating. Like I've said over and over and over, I'm for some dialogue here so everybody understands we're on the same page. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. You have any other questions? Or?
No,
okay.
sir.
All right. Thank you. All right. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman. Just because, from my point of view, I'm hearing too much he said, she said to feel comfortable making a decision here.
Yeah.
I think they need to sit down and everybody needs to come back and say, yes, this is the right thing here, and just no more he said, she said.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir. Please. Welcome.
Well, we did do this last year. The bid was put out at $500,000. As I believe the Napa bid came in over $100,000 higher than that. I think by their own bid, they're showing that it's not going to be cost effective to the county. I don't understand why we have to keep dragging this out.
Okay. All right. Jason or Chris?
I think what we can do is we will we'll meet with Napa. What we'll do is we'll come up with a new list of commonly purchased parts so that there's no reference back to the old one. We'll get their counter price as if we're purchasing it today. We'll also meet with Mr. Tomberg and then get his contract price and get an agreement on that. And then we'll price those same parts with the other suppliers, CarQuest and the others, Cold Air. And then we can bring a new list back to the board and see where that takes us. If that's
Could somebody answer the question about the $100,000 more in the original bid process?
I think the bulk of that difference is the parts pricing. Chris applied that, the cost differential on the parts pricing, so that's a lot of where it's coming from is the disagreement on this, so that could alleviate that $100,000 difference. If, in fact, we go through this process again and their parts are less expensive, then we wouldn't be estimating that $100,000 more. Because if you look, our cost for our employee and their cost for their administration were roughly equal.
Right.
So it's really the difference comes down to how much do the parts cost now versus how much would they cost under this.
Okay.
And the reason we were projecting about $100,000 more was because it looked like the parts prices were more expensive. So once we deal with that issue, we'll know whether it's more expensive or less expensive.
Don't forget, this is not an exact science. There's a few things. One is that we're looking at our past history, what we utilize on our vehicles, and assuming that we'll have a very similar history moving forward, because we don't know what's going to break. Second thing is on this is that, when we look at it, prices change constant throughout the year. Some prices go down considerably, some parts go up. So, it's not an exact science. So if you don't have the contract, you might, some parts will become a lot cheaper, some will become more expensive. So it's a projection in the future, but we tried to line it up. Staff spent a lot of time on this, and we'll meet with them. However, I do want to point out, the commission's going to hear from the other side once we go with them that all the other local vendors that we use, car dealerships, tire stores, all these other guys. So, and I don't have a problem with that, but just, we're looking at our costs. If we thought this would save money, I'd be the first person to jump on it in the environment I'm in.
I believe you would.
Guarantee you that.
I believe you would. And let me, I don't think I'm being understood here. I'm not saying we're going to go with Napa. I just want, as Peter said, he said, she said, I just want to hear the same story from both sides. And I know staff does an in-depth study on these things. And you are, Joe, you're one of the tightest guys I know with money. So I think that I don't have a problem with any of that. I just, when we sat here, I sat here and I listened to back and forth where we're not on the same page. I just want to know that we're talking about the same stuff so I can make an intelligent decision about what we should do.
As direction, if they change their pricing down to meet it, I don't think that's fair.
That.
Okay.
You got the numbers. You can work with them and just have some dialogue, ask some questions about, I don't think anybody can just look at a complete document and say, okay, I understand it fully, and I don't have to ask these questions. I think a lot of that's why we got attorneys and they never agree, because there's always those disagreements over contracts and written documents. But I just think the dialogue is important. And if they have the dialogue and come back here and say, we looked at this and this and this, agree, and this is where we disagreed, and you agree to disagree, I feel comfortable with that decision then.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Moore, was there a price list included in their response to the request for proposal?
Yes, there was.
Okay. Then
not in response to the RFP, no. We gathered those prices later when we came up with the list of sample parts. Okay. So that came later, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Joseph Paladin, Black Swan Consulting. Listen, I have a couple questions. One, I really don't understand what the monitoring process of this would be for the county. I think to monitor this thing over the year based on what they brought forward is a problem to start with. I think the most competitive way to get a competitive bid is the way that staff is doing it on a daily or on a weekly or on an item per item basis. And as long as Mr. Barrett and staff has agreed that, and they have made the statement they're buying local, I think that that's the best way to keep everybody competitive, is to give everybody an opportunity to bid on a per item per week basis. I don't understand how you'd monitor this thing over a year if you're using certain items as a generalization, and then you have other items that come during the year. Wouldn't there be a fear of maybe making up the difference on the items that you haven't had pre-bid? I don't know how you'd monitor that.
And Joe, if that was the question, I'd agree with you, but that's not the question we're here to answer. I think there's nothing better than getting on the phone or going by and saying, what can you, when I buy a car, when I buy an air conditioner, when I buy anything, a house, whatever I shop, I get, I agree with you, but that's not the question that's here, and that's why I'm trying to get an answer for this question.
All right. I just thought that overall that question would come up during the year. So, I mean, if you're going to answer this question, but it doesn't cover the overall outcome, I think that's a problem. How do you monitor that? I just didn't understand how we monitor that over a period of a year.
Yeah, it'd be hard. I mean, we don't know that once we enter into contract thinking about it, we don't know, let's say something goes down drastically in price, we don't know if that'll be automatically reduced in the contract, things like that. It's the same thing. We're going to have to, throughout the year, even if we are with them, we'll probably have to do spot checks. We went into this thinking that it would save us money, or we would have never gone down this route. It's to test whether we could save money. We were actually surprised it didn't. I have to say that. So, but I think we need to sit down with the NAPA representatives and get and go over it and make sure. And we'll either agree to disagree, or like Commissioner Wheeler said, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
But just to make one quick statement, we're not eliminating NAPA from the bidding process.
No, they get the bid right, and like they do now, we need to properly call it. Do you have it? What's the price? Yes.
All right. I'm happy with the way you're doing it. Thank you.
I'm sort of feeling a little bit like Commissioner Wheeler, having to get back and explain. In no way would I like to see this go back into a bidding process where anybody gets to change anything that they have previously submitted. That is not, when I heard that these folks were saying never contacted, no discussions, that kind of thing, that is my concern. That when you have these things in front of you, that it's completely open dialogue, that there's been communication back and forth. I do appreciate the fact that that the county is utilizing local businesses. Certainly, I am not, and did not ask you to consider going back into a bid process. Just want to make that clear.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Sort of more to make sure that everyone's on the same page with this, that we did discuss earlier in this, that only about half of the product that's used by the county fleet would be something NAPA product. The remainder of it, I believe, with the numbers that were thrown out, would be heavy duty, graders, things of that nature, which I don't believe possible after having done this for a couple of decades, that NAPA could procure better than the county is, and if so, not enough so to cover the 10% markup that they're going to put on it on top. So you'd have to go in this with a given that half of the products you're going to buy, you're going to knowingly buy at 10% higher a price than you are buying it at the present time. So we're only talking about the other half of the product. So the savings would have to be very substantial to cover the 10%.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a point.
I just want to make the comment that we have national contracts and pricing in place with people like Caterpillar, Ford dealerships, GM, Chevy, for this program that buy less than what our regular stores do. This is a separate program outside the Napa family. So we do have ways to procure at a less cost than what you're currently doing. Or we wouldn't be doing it in so many cities and counties now.
How many cities and counties do y'all have?
We have 250 plus locations, and about 80% of those are cities, counties, municipalities, public schools, and then about 20% of them represent heavy fleets, construction companies like Mosaic, which is a huge Komatsu land dredging company and land mining, strip mining company in Central Florida, and we do all their parts for them. So just in the state of Florida, we probably have 15 cities, counties, Air Force Base, you name it. It's all diversified.
All right, thank you.
It's a parts management system. It's a program for parts management is what it is.
So this is kind of a national program, you said, so
Yes,
that
sir.
is your cost then the same for everybody?
No, because things are regional.
Okay, what about in the state of Florida?
In the state of Florida, like, yeah, the initial cost is anything that we buy outside is at cost. So if we bought something from CarQuest, we would sell it at cost plus 10, but we would probably have a deal set up with someone else, another vendor, a local vendor that might buy that 10% cheaper than you're buying it now, to cover that.
Right, but
the Napa stuff is marked up at 10% at the end of the month.
Okay, but what county did you go visit?
It was Polk County, Bartow.
Polk County. So would Polk County have the same pricing we have?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe the fair way to do this, instead of giving them a chance to change the number, why don't we send this list to Polk County and ask them what their contract price was, and that way we're getting a real-life number, and you just said it should be the same, so whatever
Right.
Polk County is paying should be the price we would get, and then we can compare apples to apples.
And I tell you another thing we could do in this process is find out if they ordered a Caterpillar starter, or if they ordered something from John Deere, to address exactly your concern on the other side. I mean, going down this list, these are all things that are on the shelf at Napa, but if for those things that are, I'm just looking through some of the bills that were paid this month, I see a $7,090.40 to John Deere tractor. Did we buy a tractor, or was that a new motor? I don't know what it was, but that would be a good example, is to look back through here and see if we can compare apples to apples in this process. And I think that way I'll be able to make an intelligent decision, because right now I can't.
Again, I think we just need to explain the program, discuss it, get the dialogue, and then make an educated decision. We're not going to change the way we do our program or rebid this or anything else. We just want to be able to explain the program and how it works. You're looking at this program like it's a parts bid, and that's not what it is. It's a contracted parts management bid. That's what it is. It takes you out of the inventory business. It takes you out of the procurement business. There's many factors in this, and price is one of them.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to point out, Commissioners, I mean, I have met with these, so I get a little bothered by the fact that we haven't met, because we have, but we'll open dialogue more. So I don't want the insinuation staff didn't meet, we have meet, but we need to have more communication.
Well, this is what I'm trying to figure out here. You have met, you haven't met. You did this, you did that.
This is what it is. These prices, or these items that are in front of us, staff pulled together. It almost looks like something to do with sand, is what it really is starting to remind me of.
Well, me too, and I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to go there.
I didn't want to go there either, but that's really what it's starting to look like. I shouldn't have digressed. Okay, we have a motion on the floor what was your motion, Commissioner?
Have dialogue with them.
Okay.
Take a second look at this. I don't want any prices changed. I don't want any rebidding. I just want to make sure that our staff has the opportunity to ask the vendors any questions they want to ask, rather than just reading it and assuming that they understand this, and let them explain themselves.
And get the list from Bartow.
I like that idea too. Sure.
Do they, typically parts stores have price lists, if they could submit us a price list for these items, and we could pull it off of there.
I understand what you're saying, but this is a little bit different than just a price list. What he's saying here is to compare apples to oranges on what they're going to do. You need to call, if not Bartow, another one of the Napa stores that's in that just like Commissioner O'Brien said. Are their prices going to be the same? And they said yes.
And let me say too, just because somebody brought up contracts, so on and so forth, and paying less than's on the contract or more that's on the contract. That's a two-edged sword. When you got an annual contract on something, you're going to pay more for some stuff than you would if you can bid it, but you're going to pay less for some stuff that's gone up. I know for years, I think the county's got an annual contract on gasoline, or did have when I was sheriff anyway, and sometimes that's an advantage or disadvantage. But I do believe that shopping is the best way to, in general, shopping is the best way to get the best deal. I can go to Sam's and look at something that Walmart sells for less money than Sam's does. But you'd think you'd buy it cheaper at Sam's, or you might go to Publix and find something cheaper. I mean, they play this with items when they've got a lot of items. So it's just a two-edged sword is my only point with a contract.
Yeah, I'd like to point out, as a matter of fact, because, we have our annual chemical bid. Remember, they wouldn't, because gas and fuel went up, they refused to honor it. So we broke our bid and went with the price because they couldn't deliver or they'd go under. Well, now that's changed since gas went down. And a lot of people bought, we even looked at buying futures on gas. And I'm glad we didn't because, we felt the economy was too overheated and it would have to drop. But and if you'd done that, we'd have really lost money. So, there's a lot of complicated issues here. And sometimes you can have we'll look at it all. And you have to measure the fact of having an annual contract if prices in certain items would go down considerable. Those things we try and take in consideration.
I think that's part of the problem with natural gas. They're playing with futures.
Well, I tell you what, let's keep on auto parts. And we have a motion, and I think it's pretty clear, commissioners, that go back and look at these prices and get the prices not get them from an actual operation.
Right, we'll go back to, we'll look at Bartow or Polk County and see what those prices are for these identical items.
Okay.
We'll then meet with the local Napa folks and make sure we clear up any discrepancies. Is it a rebuilt alternator? Is it a new one? We'll try and clear up the specifications there, and then we'll bring it back.
In the process of doing that, if there's a way of finding, there's got to be some similarities here, a part that Napa would not carry. If there's a way of determining it's something that we have purchased, get a price of what if it's John Deere, Caterpillar, something like that, and try to, I know it's like a stretch, but see if they've done the same thing over there to see if us paying 10% for a part bought from Napa was actually cheaper or not because of their nationwide volume discount or whatever. Do you understand what I'm saying?
We'll check on that. If it's a specialty item for a road grader or a street sweeper, we can check on that too.
And then just, because I think that's a very legitimate, if that's the other half of the auto parts dilemma or story, that's a legitimate concern. All right, and we've got a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously, and we are going to take a 15-minute break. Meeting will come back to order. We left off under the Public Works item, and now we are on a staff update for Sector 3. Sector 3 beach update.
Thank you,
Mr. Moore, welcome.
Mr. Chairman. This is a staff update on the Sector 3 beach renourishment project. There is no backup on it, but we'd like to bring you up to date on a couple of items. We did have a meeting yesterday with...
Gentleman in the back. Mark. Thank you, Mr. Winchester.
We did have a meeting yesterday with Ranger Construction. They are working with their 3 upland mine sources. They're committed to getting us new samples of sand, the more coarser grade of sand that can be used in those areas of the beach where it's being reduced because of the use of upland sand. They did commit to getting us those samples as early as today and at least by this week. Once we get those samples, we can then turn them over to Coastal Tech, our coastal resources consultant, and then they will rebuild and remodel those beach fill templates with the goal of addressing those hot spots in those areas of concern, particularly Sea Oaks, Golden Sands, Disney, and those areas that were being shorted the largest for the sand fill. Dr. Gorham is here. He can update you on the schedule for Sector 3, and I'll let Jonathan take it from there.
Just real quick, we're not going to vote on it. This is just an update, right?
It's just an informational item for update only.
All right, thanks.
Yes, good morning, Jonathan Gorham, Coastal Resource Manager. And yes, we really asked for the time here on the agenda today to give you a progress report on what we're doing to move this Sector 3 project forward. And given the importance of the project and the time constraints that we know we have, we'll plan on doing this on a regular basis, but there is no staff recommendation or specific board action requested associated with the item. And as Chris mentioned at the last meeting, the October 13 meeting, the direction of the board was to work with Ranger Construction Industries and their suppliers to identify some alternate material that they could provide that would have this higher median grain size than the material that they had proposed to date. And then for staff and the consultant to do additional project redesign around this material with our goal of submitting a permit modification to DEP that wouldn't reflect these large reductions in the sand volume that were associated with the originally proposed material. And again, as Chris mentioned, we have met with Ranger. They've given us some indications that with some changes in their dredge cuts and their material processing, that they do have material that will result in a significantly increased median grain size. We hope to get the detailed quantitative information from them today, and if we get that information, we do expect to be able to have all this redesign work completed and the permit modification submitted by October 30th. And I did, if we can switch over to the document camera, prepare an estimated timeline for permit issuance. Is that legible there, or can I zoom in? That a schedule that we feel is a realistic schedule, and it's been modified, this timeline, to reflect the additional time required to do the additional redesign work, and also our expectation, based on some conversations and correspondence with the Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that our proposed change from an offshore sand source to an upland sand source will require a formal reinitiation of consultation between the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Corps. With some input from the consultant, I prepared this timeline for permit issuance that, again, we feel is realistic. It assumes that the agencies will act expeditiously in significantly less time than they typically do and less time than they are allotted by rule and statute. And I believe it also illustrates why we will need the help of the legislative delegation to secure the permit in time for construction this year. And we can identify some areas within this timeline, specific areas and steps where we may be able to realize some additional gains in time with a goal, we feel, towards the latest date of permit issuance that would allow for the construction to proceed this year, being March 1st of this year. And if I want to go through this, the schedule and timeline a little bit, we have start dates and end dates for these various steps. Beginning at the meeting of the 13th and moving through the 30th of this month, Coastal Tech will be taking the revised geotechnical data, redesigning the project fill templates, recalculating the volumes that can be placed at each of these R monuments, submitting modified permit sketches and a design document to the department. And in order to meet that schedule of the 30th, we are expecting to get the geotechnical information again from the contractors by tomorrow. If we move down to the next step in the process, the period here from the end of this month to the end of next month, a 30-day period, we have various entities taking actions on the permit modification request. In that 30-day period, the DEP would be considering and evaluating the permit modification request that we submit. We're assuming that they will not have any requests for additional information other than one generated to tell us that biological opinions from the federal agencies will be required to complete the application. What's really new in this picture and reflected in this timeline are the roles of the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the National Marine Fisheries Service. In this 1-month period, they will need to reinitiate the formal consultation with the Corps of Engineers. This consultation is a back and forth process with the Corps and with the applicant that allows the agencies to prepare their biological opinion, the central federal permitting document. In that time period, we expect both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to reinitiate their consultation. We expected that to be a formal reinitiation of consultation under which the service has 135 days to respond with a biological opinion. The concerns of the National Marine Fisheries Service as we change from an offshore to an upland source are much less. Many of the areas the National Marine Fisheries Service has concerns are specific to offshore dredging and not to the upland. We're not offshore dredging up submerged lands. We're not laying pipeline corridors across a nearshore hard bottom. So their level of concern is actually somewhat reduced. Also in that monthly time period, and something that's necessary for the reinitiation of consultation to happen, is our consultant and county staff will need to have a number of meetings with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, the folks in the Archie Carr National Wildlife Refuge, to facilitate their review and help them focus their questions and comments that will be contained within the biological opinion. In the following time period from November 30th, 2009 to January 30th, 2010. No, thank you, Chris. We have a time frame wherein the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service are completing their biological opinions, and they're submitted to the Department of Environmental Protection so that the department can declare our application complete, and the action of the DEP in doing so, declaring the application complete. In this time frame here, we've made the assumption that the Fish and Wildlife Service will take 60 days rather than the allotted 135 days to complete their biological opinion. Following the state DEP deeming the application complete, they then prepare a draft permit and notice of intent to issue, which they send to the county. We take that notice of intent to issue and publish it in the local paper of record, and a 14-day public comment period follows, wherein anyone whose substantial interests are affected by the project can petition DEP to not issue the permit. Following that public comment period, if no adverse comments are received, we have the DEP issuing the final permit and notice to proceed. Once that permit is issued by DEP, the Army Corps of Engineers can then issue their final permit, which we have taking us all the way to April 15th. Now, as I think we all know, the marine turtle conservation rules give us a deadline to complete our construction and get off the beach of May 1st. So following this timeline, we do not have sufficient time to construct the project. And what I would like to do here is look at this timeline with an eye towards some of the areas where we may hopefully, with the assistance of our legislative delegation, trim some time. And I've just done this in kind of a crude fashion with a pen and ink. Starting here in this step, and again, we're trying to trim enough time off this process to get a permit issuance and notice to proceed by March 1st. If we can, in the very first step, speed up a little bit the date for reinitiation of consultation, not take 30 days to have all our meetings and all our coordination with the National Marine Fisheries Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Corps. And with a commitment by those agency staff to review the redesign that we're going to submit at the end of this month immediately on receipt, and a commitment from the federal agency staff to meet with the county staff as early as possible, and a commitment from county staff to travel if needed to make those meetings, we would hope we might be able to shave a week off that process, and that takes us to about November 23rd here, where we can begin this reinitiation of consultation. And the process by where the agencies, particularly the Fish and Wildlife Service, prepares these biological opinions are probably the most crucial time frame. We certainly can't have them take 135 days. Taking 60 days is obviously putting a big crimp in a potential schedule. But if we can get some pressure and press the Fish and Wildlife Service to complete their biological opinion in 30 days instead of 60 from this reinitiation of consultation, we now have them completing their process and issuing biological opinions December 23rd, right before Christmas. And then, as we've mentioned, the ball kind of jumps over into the DEP's court, the state of Florida's court. Wherein the DEP, once they've received these BOs and declared the application complete, by rule and statute, they have 90 days to issue a draft permit and notice of intent to issue. Our original schedule here assumed that they were going to only take 30 days. Perhaps we can press DEP to issue in 3 weeks instead of 30 days. I'm recognizing that this may be a lot to ask because that includes over the Christmas holiday. But that would save us another week. And then we have this draft permit and notice of intent to issue released by January 14th. Most of the rest of the schedule is fixed and not a tremendous number of opportunities to save a little time. But if we can do these above steps, we are pretty much where we need to be. In that the public notice step, we can't really trim any time from that. There's required publication periods in Florida Administrative Weekly, the local paper of record, statutorily required a period of time for comments to be received. But we can finish that process perhaps by February 5th. And then the DEP would be able to issue their final permit and notice to proceed by February 20th. And the Corps taking a week to finalize their permit after the issuance of the Corps permit. We could see having the full authorizations then by February 27th. And I'm not representing to you that this is doable. It would be extraordinary, but that is what we would need to do in order to preserve enough time to go to construction this year.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Commissioner Solari.
Jonathan, going on the sand delivery timeline, how much sand can we put on the beach in one day in this process?
Some of that will change because we're changing the mix of sand sources as we go into the project redesign. My conversations last week with Mr. Schaefer at Ranger was they felt they could deliver and place on the beach 7,500 cubic yards per day.
Okay, so does anybody have a calculator? If we have 60 work days, can we figure out how much sand that is?
I think when we looked at the previous estimates, we were figuring on 4,000 cubic yards per day, and that was
that's 240,000. So that doesn't get us anywhere near
trucks.
done.
Right.
60 times 7,500 is 450,000 cubic yards if everything went well.
Okay, so now we have, if it's the best case for getting the permit, and then we have, if it's the best case for putting the sand on the beach, we're only 25,000 cubic yards short. And that's working 7 days a week. Are we able to work it 7 days a week at all the mines and deliver sand on the beach for all 7 days?
I believe the bid did not contemplate 7 day a week construction. That would be something that we would have to
I'm not worried about the bid. I'm just trying to see if it's physically possible to, given the bottlenecks, to get enough sand on the beach. That's the first concern.
If it was communicated to me correctly, Mr. Schaefer is going to get us all that information in writing this week. We asked at the 10 o'clock meeting, we're having a meeting every week with Ranger Construction, and we'll get more information. There were some limitations on we had made verbal agreements with some of the local minds with the residents out there that we would work certain hours and not 7 days a week. But, you know, a lot of it might be staging too. It might not be coming out of our minds, coming out of other minds, so we may have the ability to do that. But I will have to disclose that I did meet with all the homeowners on the last several years out on 82nd, and we said we wouldn't run 7 days a week. But that doesn't mean this project, because there's other minds, and we can move it around and make it work, and it's up to Mr. Schaefer, who's going to give us that information, if I'm correct. Have I said that correctly, staff?
That is correct. He would get a plan back to us, Ranger Construction. If you're looking at numbers of trucks, and I think that's where you were going with the 7,500 cubic yards a day is 500 trucks a day.
I'm not even worried about number of trucks. I don't know where the bottleneck is, but I think we have to take right now, not before too many more weeks are up, a very hard look at the bottlenecks. I don't know how much sand. Once you get the trucks, you can have 100 trucks lined up at the beach. I don't know from that point on how many cubic yards of sand you can get on the beach. But with all the other concerns I've been hearing lately, I'm certainly not willing to just guess that we can just dump the sand and run, and that, you know, at the beach head there are time constraints that we have to look at. And, you know, there are several, and I'm not clever enough to figure out where the bottlenecks are, but it seems like there probably are some bottlenecks. Originally the plan anticipated 4,000 cubic yards a day. Now we're doubling that, and doubling it gives us just barely the possibility of almost getting enough sand on the beach. And that's after already looking at the best possible permitting process. So I just want to make sure, hopefully, I guess we're going to meet on this in the next commission meeting, but certainly want these questions answered to the best of our ability. I mean, I understand that nothing's exact or anything like that, but if we have committed to certain Sundays or Saturdays not being used at different mines, we have to take that in consideration. Have to plug in at least a half dozen rain days or whatever, I guess. I don't know, maybe with sand you don't have to worry about rain days. But we have to look at something that's realistic going forward and have two views. One is the best case view on getting the permitting, which we got today. The other is a realistic case. And the other is the best case of putting X amount of sand on the beach. And the other is a realistic case. But the time constraints are closing in on us. And I don't want us to miss a date and fail to put sand on the beach because we're thinking about doing something which isn't even possible in the best case.
Yeah, you know, as we meet weekly with Ranger, the picture will kind of clarify as far as where their trucks will be coming from, how many from each mine, and then we can look at things like perhaps staging it in such a way that the 82nd Avenue mine isn't used on the weekend, but we pull from the other two. But I think as we get a little bit closer and continue meeting with Ranger, that picture should clear up a little bit.
Yeah, but that's to clear up in the near term rather than in March. We need to really get some idea of that now. Something else. Oh, can we work in multiple areas on the beach at the same time?
Yes, when I talked with Mr. Schaefer last week, and he provided that estimate of 7,500 cubic yards per day of production. He said he was looking at probably having 3 crews and working from 3 accesses at one time to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay. Mr. Wells, welcome.
I'm not really too much involved except for the trucks. The trucks don't bother me. But I was out there yesterday, and that condition out there by Sea Oaks and along that beach is in condition red. And if I lived out there, I'd be down here pounding on your door because those people are in trouble. And we get a real good northeaster, some of those places are going to be gone.
Oh, the beach you're talking about?
Yeah, you lost about 8 foot. Yesterday you lost about 8 foot more because you had 3 days of northeasters. They lost about 8 foot more of the high beach. And everything just keeps coming down. So you got when you consider trucking this and the jobs, you have to consider the people may lose their homes if we get a real good northeaster. That's all. Thank you.
Wells. Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Wendy Tremarchi. I live on Doubloon Drive. In front of my house, we lost about 3 feet yesterday in about a 12-hour period. We already have spent well over $100,000 to put up a seawall. This has been years and years and years in the making, and I understand that, and I know that you're all doing the best you can to get this done. But we seem to be low man on the totem pole here. We have almost no beach left, even at low tide. My understanding now is that the sand may not be correct, that now we need to go to a different type of sand. Is that going to be enough to pass muster, or are we guessing that it's enough? Because how long will that process take to say, okay, yes, this is correct sand, or not?
Maybe that's good. Mr. Moore?
Excuse me, once we go through this redesign process with our coastal consultant, he should be able to tell us exactly how many cubic yards we'll be able to place in each segment of beach. And if he places it correctly and uses the coarser sand in the areas where it had been projected to be reduced, we should be able to get a full template of sand in areas all along the beach, just as we did when we were using the offshore template.
And if this timeline doesn't work, and we get too much into turtle season, then we won't get the permit, then what happens?
Mr. Moore?
Well, we would have to either, do the project next year or somehow try and, that's why we're trying to speed it up as much as we can.
And would we have to go through this whole sand and everything all over again? Or would we just be able to say, okay, we have to do it next year and get the permitting and process to then start it next year? Or do you have to do this whole permit process over again?
Jonathan, did you want to speak on the permitting?
Yes, and if it became necessary to construct this project next year, that there would be no additional permitting steps necessary. We would just be able to initiate construction as soon as the sea turtle nesting season was over on November 1st.
And that money that's earmarked for that project for this year would not be touched and be there for next year?
No, we're moving the money forward. We have, the money is earmarked. All our capital projects remain unless the board was to vote, but we move all our money forward for capital projects. We've set it aside already.
Okay.
And just to follow up on that, also the Sebastian Inlet District also committed their funds going forward. So they reaffirmed their commitment to fund over $4 million on the project. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But I'd just like to add one thing. I thought our commitment was to try to get the sand on the beach this year, so I don't want to see slippage, and that's why I want to see if we can get these clear timelines as soon as possible, because I personally wouldn't want to live in a house that was on the beach that doesn't have any protection, period, and to have been waiting this long to get the sand and then be told another year is a path I'd rather not go down.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is William Troxel, 916 Orchid Point Way, Town of Orchid. I am also a council member in the Town of Orchid, and as of yesterday, I've been named the full-time representative to the Beach and Shore Preservation Committee.
My condolences.
Paul Johnson, since I've been so deeply involved in this for the past few months. And I'd like to read into the record a resolution that was passed yesterday in the Town of Orchid, resolution number 2009-07, a resolution of the Town of Orchid, Florida regarding the ongoing beach renourishment project within Sector 3 of Indian River County and the potential impact on the Town of Orchid, providing for the repeal of prior inconsistent resolutions, severability, and an effective date. Whereas the Town Council recognizes that beach erosion is a serious menace to the economy and general welfare of the people of Florida and has advanced to emergency proportions. And whereas the Town Council further recognizes that the Florida Legislature has declared, pursuant to Section 161.088 Florida statutes, it is a necessary governmental responsibility to properly manage and protect Florida beaches from erosion. And whereas, as such, representatives of the Town of Orchid have been involved in most, if not all, aspects of Sector 3 Beach Renourishment Project since its inception and have been communicating and meeting from time to time with both Indian River County staff and Coastal Tech. And whereas the town has also had a member of the Town Council serve on and attend the Beach and Shore Preservation Advisory Committee. And whereas throughout the bidding process, the town was fully expecting to receive its full complement of sand regardless of the sourcing of the sand selected by the Indian River County Commissioners. and volume reductions were never even mentioned to the town. And whereas on October 13, 2009, the town was extremely disappointed to learn that as a result of using upland sand in lieu of dredge sand, the town's beach and shoreline at Monument R34 would be penalized 88.6% of its renourishment volume when using the upland sand approved for use during the bidding process. And whereas Monument R34 fronts 10 Orchid Island Golf and Beach Club condominium buildings with a real estate value of over $100 million. And whereas the appropriate half mile of beach comprising R34, R35, and R36 that the town of Orchid fronts comprises the most valuable beach property in all of the 6.6 miles of Sector 3 that is being restored. And whereas the 88.6% reduction would effectively leave these buildings, which already front severely and critically eroded beaches, virtually unprotected in the event of even minor storms. And whereas as the beaches of Monument 34 have already been compromised by a seawall immediately to the north, which was permitted by the state of Florida, and a second seawall immediately south of these monuments further maximizes the danger to the beaches within the town of Orchid. And whereas the town council also recognizes that it is the policy of the state of Florida under section 161.088 Florida statutes that beach renourishment and management plans be designed to reduce potential upland damage or mitigate adverse impacts caused by improved, modified, or altered inlets, coastal armoring, or existing upland development. And whereas in order to protect the beaches within the town of Orchid, as was expected by the town, and to reduce potential upland damage or mitigate against the adverse impacts caused by the critically eroded shoreline within the town of Orchid respectively requests that the Indian River County Commission ensure that any application of renourishment sand to Sector 3 beaches include the full complement of sand from Monument R34, which was 10,576 cubic yards, R35, 13,511 cubic yards, and R36, 14,766 cubic yards. And whereas the town council deems that this resolution is in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Orchid, now therefore be it resolved by the town council of the town of Orchid that incorporation of recitals, the foregoing recitals are deemed true and correct and thereby fully incorporated herein by reference. Resolved by town council and the town of Orchid hereby resolves as follows. Part A, that the Indian River County Commission take such lawful and necessary steps consistent with the public policy of the state of Florida to reduce potential upland damage or mitigate against the adverse impacts caused by the critically eroded shoreline within the town of Orchid. Section B, that any application of renourishment to Sector 3 beaches include the full complement of sand for the Monument R34, R35, and R36. I also have the volumes there again, but I won't reiterate those. For reasons expressed in the aforementioned recitals. Then there's a severability clause. Effective date, this resolution shall become effective immediately upon its adoption by the town council and the town of Orchid, Florida. This was adopted by the town of Orchid, Florida in a regular meeting assembled yesterday on the 19th day of October 2009. This is an unsigned copy, which I'd be happy to provide. The mayor has signed a copy this morning prior to this meeting, and that will be sent to the commission. But we really need you to do everything to get us the full complement of sand, as we are very, very, very difficult situation, especially along Monument R34.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Councilman Trutzel, I don't think there's anything any of us up here disagree with on that, and certainly trying to move in that direction as hard and fast as possible. Any comments or questions, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, just update a couple more things. Probably the biggest bottleneck going forward is going to be with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and their local representative here in Vero had some concerns about using an upland sand source, and we feel a lot of those concerns were based on a project down in St. Lucie County where they did use upland sand, but it had not been processed and washed and screened to the level that our miners are planning to do. So a lot of it I think will just involve sitting down with the Fish and Wildlife guys, walking through our processes and get their level of confidence up to where they would understand that ours is going to be nothing like St. Lucie. It's going to be a much cleaner, better sand, particularly for the sea turtle nesting. I think that's where their primary focus is. And then most of these biological opinions have already been written, and staff has said they already included verbiage related to upland sand sources. So I think if we can just sit down and work with the Fish and Wildlife staff, get their level of comfort up, things should proceed fairly quickly. I think the other important thing to keep in mind is that we yesterday at the Beach and Shores Committee, we were updated on the 2009 sea turtle nesting results. And while the numbers were preliminary, county-wide, sea turtle nests were down below the 5-year average. The only place where the sea turtle nest showed an increase was in Sector 7, which is where we just completed a beach renourishment project. So I think the Fish and Wildlife folks, when we show them the erosion of the beaches in Sector 3, the lack of nesting habitat there, the success in Sector 7, where we did do a renourishment project, I think will help convince them that not only does this project need to get done, it needs to get done this year. And I think we can just sit down with staff and work with them and get that level of confidence up with them that we should be able to proceed through and get this done.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I find encouraging in this, if it works out the way my mind, and I have it in my mind, is in front of these structures that Councilman Trutzel talked about, that we could say, okay, we need grain size X to be able to maximize the amount of sand in front of these structures that you're the most concerned about, as Wendy mentioned also. And to be able to do that, you can't do that in my opinion, from an offshore source. You can only do that whenever you have the opportunity to adjust the screen and to have the grain size come out the other end to be able to place exactly where you want to. So,
and Mr. Chairman, that's what was discussed at the meeting yesterday with the bidders and Ranger. And all the miners agreed that basically they're going to give their sand data to Mike Walther with Coastal Tech. He's going to do exactly what you said, take the best sand and put it where it's needed the most. And then Ranger will still have to kind of bless that and say, yeah, we agree. But the miners all also agreed that they may not each get a third because of that. And they all kind of voiced a team approach that they're willing to be less of the project if it means getting the project done. So Ranger and the miners were all on board with that, and that's what Mike Walther is going to bring back next Monday. Say, this is my recommendation, and we need X of this mine, Y of this mine, and Z out of this mine. And whatever those numbers are, Ranger and the miners indicated they would go along with that. So we should be able to do exactly what you were referring to.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Commissioners? Any other comments from the public? Okay, there is no vote, so we'll move forward. Thank you very much for the, Mr. Glenn, welcome.
Just for a second.
Sure, no problem.
Bill Glenn, 1802 East Barefoot Place, Vero Beach. This thing has turned out to be a gigantic bureaucratic mess outside the boundaries of our county. I congratulate our county staff and our commission for the work they're doing. This is one of the best efforts I've ever seen you all do together. And it's a great team effort. This needs to be done. In the last 4 days, we've lost 3 to 6 foot of sand in Sector 3 from the weather conditions. And it goes nowhere but worse after that because the sand doesn't come back on the beach until next summer. We're going to lose major property if this doesn't get done this coming season. And I think we're going to get good support, both in Tallahassee and I'm hoping from Washington, to make Fish and Wildlife and Army Corps of Engineers understand the emergency involved here. But I want to thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Van.
My name is Louise Schmidt, and I live in the Poster condominium for this renourishment project. We're in really big trouble. Looking out of my window this morning, before high tide, 2 hours, there's no beach. And we have less than 10 foot in front of my window to the ocean. So if we're losing, and we're in nor'eastern season now, I beg you all to please do what you can to unstick this process, which has been going since the hurricanes. We've been told we get this project done, and we're still, and then yesterday we hear that we may not get it again this year. I also understand that the bids for renourishment will go up if you don't do it this year, and they will increase, so it will be more expensive. So please do what you can to help us. We're in desperate shape.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments from the public? Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Commissioner Wheeler.
I would encourage the individuals here that spoke and other individuals that may be watching this to not only express your concerns with us, but with your state representatives, the governor, your congressmen, your senators. They're the people that really hold the power to get this done fast. So I wouldn't take it for granted. I would contact them by phone, by email, by letter, and ask them for their support and keep them interested in it. I think they are, and they've all agreed to do that. But I'd still certainly communicate with them.
And Councilman Trotzel, that's a good point. Your resolution that you've approved, I think we've got plenty of horsepower at the state level to be able to get this done. But there's clearly some federal entities and organizations that we're going to need as much pull as possible, and there's nothing more powerful. I mean, from one elected official to another one, that does help, but the individuals that spoke, for you to just pick up the phone or email your representative in this process and let them know the straits we're in, Bill, that may be a good thing for you to coordinate through the Barrier Island Coalition. Okay. Thank you. If there's no further business, we'll move on to utility matters. Thank you. Shell Lane East portion of Summer Place petition sewer service in River County project UCP 4039.
Move approval.
Olson's. Okay, we got a motion to approve from Commissioner Wheeler.
Second.
I'll second that. Dan, is there anything that we have to know other than just vote?
There's sand on Shell Lane.
There is sand on Shell Lane. Thank you, sir. And probably. Okay, thank you.
Do we have it?
We've got a motion to approve from Commissioner Wheeler, and I seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Next, we have Amendment 3, continuing consulting service work order with Mastella Mower for engineering service.
Second.
Motion to approve staff recommendation from Commissioner Solari with the second from Commissioner Wheeler. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Now, County Attorney matters. Okay, acquisition of right-of-way of County Road 510. Mr. DeBrawl, welcome.
Good morning. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. Commissioners, for your consideration today, we have purchase of 2 parcels. If you take a look at your monitors, you'll see parcel 221, a 50 by 50 strip of right-of-way that's needed, and also parcel 223, a 50 by 20 strip of right-of-way that's needed. The estate of Saul Miller is being represented by Raymer McGuire of Fixel McGuire in Willis. Mr. Miller passed away back in the 1940s, and so for the past 60 years, title has never been removed from his name into the names of his relatives or heirs. Even though there were wills out there, they were never probated. The taxes are current, so somebody has been paying the taxes. But for the last 60 years, this property has been in the name of the deceased. So in order for the county to clear title to the property, we knew it had to be probated so it could get clear title. Initially, when we began discussing this with Mr. Mike Swan, a local attorney, Mr. McGuire and staff, we thought that 1 probate action would be needed. Instead, that has now grown to 4. Mr. Swan has come up with a family tree, the Miller family tree. And if I can just zoom out on that a little bit. You can see that some of the people that will be inheriting this, his sole asset, is down to 1/28th of a share of whatever proceeds may be in the estate. Staff is recommending a whole purchase of these 2 parcels, as our right-of-way takes will make the remaining parcels unbuildable. We're purchasing this both parcels for a total of $38,000. There will be $4,000 attorney's fees on the larger parcel for Mr. McGuire and $2,000 on the other. Staff also recommends the payment of the probate fees and recording fees to the firm of Rossway, Moore and Taylor in the amount of $1,435. Staff recommends approval of the contract. Are there any questions?
Commissioners?
So moved.
Got a motion to approve from Commissioner Wheeler.
Second.
And a second from Commissioner Fletcher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. DeVraw.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next, we have Commissioners' matter. We have an appointment to the Tourist Development Council.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move appointment for Ursula Gunter.
Got a motion to approve Ursula Gunter.
Commissioner.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. What vacancy is being filled here? Because
this was the vacancy that was filled by Susan Hunt. It was the vacancy for, she worked at the Outlet Mall, and now she's with the Chamber, and this is that vacancy.
Okay, because the statute says that the vacancy must be filled by a person of interest, someone that is in the tourism industry or participates in the tourism industry or is interested in the tourism industry.
That's a pretty broad brush.
Ursula Gunter did.
But I bring that up because some of them are very specific. Sure. That it has to be a member, a hotel, motel operator, RV park operator.
Yeah. Okay.
So as long as that she qualifies there, that's fine.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I do understand that Ursula Gunter has been the manager at the Indian River Mall for over 8 years, 8+ years. And in addition, she has served on the council with the Chamber in the capacity in the interest of tourist development as well.
Is there any further comments? We've got a motion on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Renee Page.
Okay.
And I do so, nothing against Ms. Gunter, but marketing for a mall, I believe, is fairly limited. Ms. Page does the marketing for the Sunrise Theater down in Fort Pierce. In that capacity, she's responsible for bringing national acts into the town, things that would really draw a lot of tourism and events. I think she has a much more broader background in marketing, and I think we had a mall appointee just previously. I'm not sure that now wouldn't be a good time to change, to have a different perspective, and somebody used working with national type acts and bringing those to a local community. The mall, again, nothing against Ms. Gunter, but organizing a couple of auto sales in the parking lot, I don't really consider to be a huge marketing expertise. I think Ms. Page has that marketing expertise, and I think we need to bring in some fresh ideas and really get that thing ramped up.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is she a voter? Because the statute, or our code calls for her to be an elector of the county. So she'd have to be registered to vote in Indian River County.
Okay. That I don't know out of any of them.
I know she lives in the county. I don't know if and I don't know if any of them are electors.
I would say one of them is, since they're running for city council.
Yes. And Mr. Chairman, the other thing I want to bring up is that Commissioner Bryan brings up the point of the limitation to the mall. I just wanted to update that Ursula Gunter has worked with the Chamber on the Tourism Committee for, and believe Penny Chandler's in the audience. I believe she worked there between 7 or 8 years.
Okay. All right.
With the Tourism Committee.
Committee for the Chamber. Okay. All right. Commissioners, we have nomination, one for Ursula Gunter, one for Renee Lynn Page. At this time, we'll go ahead and take, or I'll just take in order here, Ursula Gunter. All those in favor, if there's no further nominations, all those in favor of Ursula Gunter signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. We've just appointed our Tourist Development Council appointee. Next, we have the Solid Waste Disposal District and Board. Final payment work order number 1 to Brown and Caldwell for engineering.
Move staff recommendation.
Got a motion to approve staff recommendation from Commissioner Solari with a second from Commissioner Wheeler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, according to my agenda, if there's no further business to be transacted at this time, I now declare this meeting adjourned.